Declare come to order the special meeting of the San Carlos City Council Redevelopment Agency, April 18, 2011. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, good evening and welcome. This is a special study session related primarily to the fire issue. We're going to have, I will go through and explain how we're going to make this occur, and I want to thank especially all my colleagues for being kind enough to get a number of questions in before we started this meeting. We will start with, okay, I'm going to try to arrange these as best I can. We will start with public comment. Item number 2, these are public comments for people wishing to make comments on items not on the agenda. I will deal with people who want to talk to the fire proposal in just a moment. First, I will start with Mr. Fuller. Ben Fuller.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Good evening. Mr. Fuller, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Okay. Great to see everybody from the City Council. I'm just going to read a quick letter that we're going to submit to everybody on behalf of the GESC Board. That's the Greater East San Carlos Neighborhood Association Board. Much has been said recently about the use and misuse of the Brown Act. We've received emails from the City Council regarding how we cannot get answers to our letters and questions because of the Brown Act. And now we're hearing about a government watchdog group threatening legal action because of this same Brown Act being misused by our City Council. Now, we are not aware, actually, of any of the particulars of why this happened, and we don't want to make a judgment. We would still like to make a request for changes in how we operate government business in San Carlos. We believe closed-door meetings should be a very rare exception, not a common occurrence, and we call upon the City Council to enact a sunshine ordinance. After the City Council meeting, we'll submit the sunshine ordinance request letter via email with an attachment of the copy of the sunshine ordinance used in Vallejo, California. Even this city in financial difficulties can afford to hold open government in the light of day. We further call upon the City Council to add to the spirit of an open government in the oath they pledge to the Republic at the beginning of every meeting. We call upon all public servant and citizen alike to honor those who fight for democracy by seeking to mend ours. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman yields balance of his time. Just as a point of information, all items on the agenda are not just at the whim of City Council. They are cleared by City Attorney, and putting something on closed agenda does go through the City Attorney. Pat Bell. Mr. Randall, if you want to go ahead and start walking up, I'm going to call you right after Ms. Bell. Pat Bell, good evening. You're recognized for 2 minutes.
I'm speaking on the one item on the agenda. I hope that's okay. I was told that now is the time.
Bring it on.
I hope you'll look at each of these proposals very carefully and dispassionately and leave your personal feelings behind. You're doing a job here as city councilmen, and we deserve to have you look at this as to see what's best for the city. I remember the first report from Tridata when the man said, if you hadn't sent a letter to Belmont, you could save money this way and this way and this way, and it would be better. Don't go with CAL FIRE. Be nice to your neighbors. So you didn't do that, and you stepped on a lot of toes, and you made a lot of people mad, and you made a lot of people laugh in this county too, I can tell you. So don't do it again, okay? Instead of just rushing headlong off the cliff so that you can get something done before you start campaigning for re-election, think about what you're doing and do something that allows you to do a good job, not just a quick job.
Speaker yields balance of her time. Mr. Randall. Good Good evening, Mr. Randall. You're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Brian Randall, San Carlos. Regarding Councilman Grassilli's proposal, which would keep San Carlos Belmont together with regionalization in the near future, that is the best way to go. Councilman Klein said when speaking of Councilman Grassilli, he said, what's that old saying, a bird in the hand, this is Mr. Klein speaking, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Mr. Klein, the bird we have in our hand right now is Belmont San Carlos. The rest are in the bush, and you are frantically chasing them. Do not let go of the one in your hand, San Carlos Belmont. Withdraw the letter of dissolution. I believe the Florida-based Wackenhut Services proposal has been tailored to suit the well-known San Carlos quest for money. This is an emergency service. The 6% blood money would go to the relatives of those who die, not to the city. Wackenhut Services is a long established in security, not city firefighting, and they have much publicity over CIA connections. Do we want to take a chance? I think not. Here is a company that is applying for work and saying, yes, we can supply the service you want, but if we fail, we will give you back 6%. What? They say they will be qualified within 3 years, but if we fail, we will give you $100,000. What? Thank you.
Gentleman yields the balance of his time. Greg McCarthy, followed by Americo Diaz. Mr. McCarthy, good evening. You're recognized for 2 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I can't believe you've come to the point of even considering having a private fire service and destroy what already existed for so long here. Quality fire service requires highly trained, motivated professionals who can afford to work and live nearby. These Belmont San Carlos firefighters are expertly trained and have many years of experience to deal with any type of emergency that may strike our community. Flooding, earthquakes, gas leaks, fire in our homes, businesses and high-rises, auto accidents, heart attacks and child medical emergencies, hazardous material spills, and terrorist events. These professionals risk their health and lives over their 30-year careers. They deserve respectful wages, benefits, and pensions. What is the bottom line for cost reduction in the fire department? Is there one? Is it to save money, or is there another agenda? You're now considering a private company, Wackenhut, with little or no experience running the city fire department. They're primarily used at airports and industrial sites, not the type of emergencies I just touched on. What kind of experienced firefighters are you going to attract here? Low wages, benefits, and will only lure the young and inexperienced. They'll come to get experience in San Carlos, they move on to better, high-paying departments. I don't want a constant stream of rookie firefighters protecting my family from the possible emergencies that exist. I'm sure the neighboring fire agencies don't want inferior, inexperienced firefighters responding to their jurisdictions. The fire service isn't like the police department. Wackenhut is not the sheriff's department. It's not like firing your parks department and hiring a private company with low wages and benefits to cut our lawns. People's lives and property depend on your decision to provide a professional fire department. Two-person Suburbans can't deal with every emergency or have the time to go back and get on a fire engine or truck in a true emergency. The fire engines and trucks are portable toolboxes that are equipped for any emergency that our community may face and our neighboring cities as well. Swallow your pride, stop your squabble with Belmont and the fire service. Keep the present fire authority with Belmont, confer with Belmont and the firefighters. Hammer out concessions, merge the fire administration with Redwood City. That will save you money. Hopefully that's what you're looking for.
Gentleman's time has expired. Could you sum up?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Diaz. Good evening. You're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Americo Diaz. I apologize in advance if my questions may pose a lack of understanding of the proposals. But if the proposals that are being talked about today are a result of the lack of money to fund fire stations, EMS workers, and firefighters, has the City of San Carlos or the Firefighters Union or the Fire Department looked into alternatives at the federal level? Has the City of San Carlos researched applying for the SAFER Act grant either in the past or in the future? If so, did or does the city qualify for the grant? Based on my understanding of the grant, being the SAFER grant, qualifications, it appears that the City of San Carlos does qualify, but I will obviously vet the understanding of the qualifications to the board or someone who is much more qualified. For some background information, the SAFER Act, which stands for Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response, provides financial assistance to help fire departments increase the cadre of firefighters or to rehire firefighters that have been laid off. The goal is to assist local fire departments with the staffing and deployment capabilities so they may respond to emergency work whenever they occur, assuring their communities have adequate protection from fire and fire-related hazards. All right. Also, as a long-term alternative, has the City of San Carlos researched the viability in changing the jurisdiction of the fire department to that of the federal jurisdiction? In other words, the fire department would become a federal entity and the employees would become federal employees. Therefore, TARP would be the pension programs, which I've heard is much better. Thank you.
Gentleman yields balance of his time. Any further public comment? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Moving to item number 3, the study session, presentation of fire and emergency service proposals to the City of San Carlos and direction from the City Council. Just a few general notes of what's going to happen. First, I think everybody here knows we had a 3.8 earthquake today. So just in the interest of safety, I would like people to recognize exits on the side of the room, and if something happens, please leave calmly. Also, there is a first aid kit and a defibrillator located by the elevator outside this door. What we are going to do is have 4 presentations, one from Councilman Grisilli. The city staff will do a presentation related to the standalone fire department, followed by the City of Redwood City, and then by Wackenhut. At this point, we have budgeted approximately 55 minutes per presentation. The expectation is that each presentation will take approximately 30 minutes. Last week, the members of the council agreed that they would try to provide as many questions beforehand to be handled. We're going to try to limit our questions to approximately 5 minutes per council member. There is no expectation of a decision tonight. This is a study session. The expectation is that further questions will be directed to TriData, who is our consultant. And one of the things I think we have noticed in the proposals, folks have different way of reporting numbers and dollars, et cetera, and we are looking for our consultant to TriData to, if you will, normalize the data and give us an apples to apples. With that, are there any questions from the council? And I will look at Mr. Mora.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Brian Mora, Assistant City Manager. I'll be presenting the item tonight, and I've been the project manager on this project. To give the council and the audience a little background, in October of 18th of last year, the council had a special study session on fire. During that special study session, the city's fire and emergency services consultant TriData presented an 85-page report to the council and answered many of the questions from the council. And just to echo real quickly the mayor's earlier comments, I want to thank all the council members for submitting questions earlier today and Friday. That was very helpful in preparing tonight's presentation. You'll see some additional information in the presentation as we go forward as a result of your inquiries. The TriData report described the current services, both the good things about the current fire department and also its weaknesses. It also described what the future of fire and EMS services could look like in San Carlos. TriData also prepared a request for proposal for fire and EMS services. That was approved by the City Council on October 18th, and by Friday of that week, October 22nd, that was issued at the authorization of the Council. The original RFP was scheduled to close in late last year. However, we received 3 extension requests from the City of San Mateo, CAL FIRE, and San Mateo County, and these requests moved the RFP closing date to April 1st of 2011, just a couple weeks ago. The good news, I think, in terms of those extensions is that we were able to use that time to get 2 additional proposals to bring to the council. One was work that the city staff and TriData did with the City of Redwood City to generate the so-called hybrid proposal, which you'll hear about later tonight. The hybrid proposal is basically to create a standalone city fire department, but rather than having the city manage it, Redwood City would manage it, and they'll tell you a little bit more about that later. The other proposal we got late in the cycle was from the folks at Wackenhut Services, and you'll hear from them tonight as well. They contacted us roughly 3.5 weeks before the April 1st deadline and asked if the RFP was still open. I think if the county had acted sooner, it wouldn't have been open. However, due to the fortunate opportunity of the county delaying the process, we were able to get the Wackenhut proposal in as well. Wanted to talk a little bit about the physical impact of fire as it relates to both this past year and the coming year, as was alluded to earlier. Last year, the city had a $3.5 million general fund shortfall. It was the 11th year in a row that we experienced budget cuts. The council looked at different alternative paths and decided to take a look at contracting certain services. And during that process last March, the council set a series of targets or benchmarks in an opportunity to close that gap without raising taxes. That included saving $500,000 a year in landscape maintenance, $2 million a year in the police, and $1 million a year in fire. As you know, both the landscape and police contracting projects are finished, and they have met or exceeded those savings targets, and they have also met or actually in some cases exceeded the prior service level. They've been very successful. Turning to fire tonight, you have in front of you 4 proposers, each of which, as the mayor just indicated, will have 30 minutes to present their presentation, followed by 5 minutes for each council member to ask questions. I think what's exciting in front of you, and you have in your handout there, or the council report that's also on the city's website, there are a total of 21 different variations that you have in front of you, both tonight and on the 21st. 19 of those will meet or exceed your $1 million a year savings. And I think what's also interesting to note is the Redwood City Hybrid and the Wackenhut proposals will actually cost the city less 5 years from now than we pay today for the fire JPA services. A pretty amazing achievement, I think. Also worth noting, and we've talked to you about this before, but it bears repeating tonight, the fire JPA will be literally out of money on October 12th, and so we will need to explore alternatives. If the fire JPA is to continue, it will be necessary to explore ways to reduce that budget if it continues beyond the date in which they run out of money. Tonight's study session, and again, I think the mayor did a nice job of going through this. We're going to have the overview from staff. We were going to do the public input after this point, but since you've already done that, we can jump right to the 4 presentations. We'll take them in that order: Councilmember Griselli, city staff, Redwood City, and Wackenhut. And then after that, we will ask Tri-Data to come forward to the podium and interact with the council in terms of getting any questions, comments, input that you might have as they prepare their analysis for your meeting a week from today on the 25th. We prepared, in response to some of your questions today, this table that shows you the cost of these proposals in a range at year 1, 3, 5, and 10. And at the bottom, you see that you're currently paying $7.1 million for fire service. You'll notice at year 1, 3, 5, and 10 that almost all of the options in front of you, from Wackenhut, Redwood City Hybrid, Redwood City Original, and the standalone department, as well as Councilmember Griselli, more than exceed your target. And I think that's powerful because it does suggest you have many choices to achieve your financial goals and provide the same or a better level of service. We also continue to get questions about hazmat calls, so I thought I would reproduce a portion of a table that was from the Tri-Data report. It shows you the number of calls received over a 3-year period by city. You'll notice, as the Tri-Data folks highlighted for you, that most of the hazmat calls tend to be in the North County. And as you probably recall from their report, they were questioning why the hazmat unit was located in South County, in San Carlos and Belmont, given that San Carlos had 7 calls over that 3-year period and Belmont had 2, whereas some of the other cities, as you can see, had quite a few more. It's also worth noting that there has been some discussion by the city of South San Francisco about an interest in taking over the hazmat function. And again, if you read the Tri-Data report, they would tell you that that's a better located service in their opinion. And since we've done the public comment, I will turn over now to Councilmember Griselli.
Mr. Griselli, before you start, I just wanted to say to all of the presenters, there has been tremendous work that has been put in by everybody in terms of giving these proposals, and the one thing that we wanted on the council is we wanted options. So I do want to express my appreciation to you, Mr. Griselli, that we know you put in some significant work to give us this option, and I appreciate it, and we're going to give you up to 30 minutes.
Let me know if I go over.
Okay. Okay, we'll do that. So, Mr. Griselli, hold on for just one moment. Legal precedent wanted to say, is there any additional folks who wanted to make public comment at this time on item number 3? Please fill out a speaker slip. Mr. Perkins, would you step up right behind him?
So my quick comment is, I know you guys have all worked really hard on this, and we really appreciate all the work and the financial savings that are going to be brought about to keep our city solvent, so thank you. The one concern that the GESC board had was with Wackenhut, just because we're concerned about some of their track record in other areas. We won't get into the details. And we're also very excited about having a community element where people from our community who know our community are involved. So we just want to sort of put in our word that we think Wackenhut is a bad fit for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Perkins, good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I apologize. I didn't realize you were starting at 7. I'll know to look at the web sooner. I, too, wanted to oppose the Wackenhut proposal. I don't trust a private sector company to handle this kind of responsibility. I don't trust them to work well in the community. I think that there will be a lot of contract conflicts and that the community will ultimately wind up paying a great deal more than what the contract would suggest. And the rest of the proposals are fine, but I have a real concern about the private sector trying to discharge this kind of responsibility. So I hope you'll keep those thoughts in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Pat Bell?
I would support all of the previous speakers. I don't want a bunch of rookies who are going to be qualified in 3 years. As you all know, I think, I have been the mother of the child who's in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, whose brain cells are dying quicker and quicker. And I don't want to be there again. I don't want to be there with rookies again. Done it. Didn't work out well. And it could be one of your loved ones who is in that ambulance and who needs someone with expertise. Doesn't sound like these guys have it. Let them go off and work for the CIA. I think that's a dandy place for them. San Carlos is not a good place for them. And I don't want cut-rate service and unqualified personnel. And you can mark your calendars. I agree with Ben Fuller on 2 items tonight. It's never happened before, and it's unlikely to happen again.
Speaker yields your time, and I would ask that her agreement be noted in the record. Mr. Grisilli, apologize for the interruption. Please, you have 30 minutes. Or a little more if you need, or a little less if you take it. Or. And by the way, there is chocolate up there if you need it. And
Good.
folks, there is chocolate here, too.
Just that I need chocolate. Mr. Mayor and fellow council members, thank you for indulging me this evening with a proposal for our fire service for the city of San Carlos. I apologize for my voice. I have some allergies that just don't seem to want to go away. Since I am from the last century, as I always tell people, I do not have a PowerPoint presentation. So I'll just read from my notes, and hopefully folks will get copies of this. It is on the website, I believe. Ms. Bowen, isn't it? The items that I put, the proposal that I put in, so folks can get it off of there. I think the key points, as I put in my report, is I'd like to have San Carlos and Belmont extend their fire agreement in partnership for 18 to 24 months, reworking the existing joint powers agreement or creating another partnership agreement. In that vein, I would ask that we rescind our dissolution letter to Belmont. I think that would have to happen for us to get back together. Labor has stepped up to write us a letter and offer at least a 10% reduction in compensation. Some of the other items that I have in my proposal is that we replace the formula that we're now using in the JPA with a fixed percentage during the extended partnership time. We wouldn't make any major purchases. We just made a purchase of a large vehicle last year for over $1 million, and I think for vehicles we're in pretty good shape for at least the next 2 years. And needless to say, the bottom line is service levels would not change and would stay the same during this partnership time. I guess it was in 1979, I believe, that we formed the Belmont-San Carlos Joint Powers Agreement. We were literally decades ahead of our time. As we look at today's environment of what's going on, the term shared services is in the newspaper every day. It's on the lips of every council and up and down the peninsula. Last week there was an article, or this week, concerning Burlingame and Hillsborough, who have a joint powers agreement or an agreement with their fire service, possibly talking to Millbrae and San Bruno. That seems to be moving ahead. Menlo Park has a group down in the southern part. North County has an agreement with Daly City. We would be literally swimming upstream, in my opinion, if we give this up. This is the future. We are going to be spending an awful lot of money to terminate this agreement, which is in, by the way, just to be clear, in all the agreements, and Mr. Moore, correct me if I'm wrong, none of the proposals list the dollars that will cost us to break this up. My proposal, there are no termination costs, large termination costs, because we don't break it up. The other ones all will have that. And also, hazmat will have to be, as mentioned by Mr. Mora, hazmat will have to be reformulated some way because we are hazmat. If we break up Belmont San Carlos Fire, hazmat will have to be reformulated. I've listed some of the assumptions that I used for the financial analysis that I went through. I'll just go down a couple of them. Chief Fry would, and I've not spoken to Chief Fry about this. It's an assumption. Chief Fry would not retire in fiscal year 2012. All the compensation paid next year would be decreased by 10%. Our CalPERS may rise a bit in 2012 because that would be out of our control. I wanted to make sure I was fair on both sides. No major vehicle purchase, as I mentioned. And we would lower our contribution for our OPEB, the operating, the pension and health care liabilities that we have. I also want to make sure that people understand that in the fiscal year 2011, we received a grant for a fire vehicle of $673,000. I took that out of the proposal for next year. And I also took out the reserves. We used almost $600,000 in reserves to make the budget balance for the fiscal year 2011. I took that out also. Coming to the final items, our total would drop, and according to my analysis, approximately a little over $1 million. Even with the same contributions that we're using now in the JPA, San Carlos would save over $500,000. And if we change the formula to 5149 or 51.5, 48.5, we would save $750,000. As was shown on the slide, we're looking for $1 million. And I feel that 754 is close enough to get and keep the fire department that we have and to maintain the service that we have and to not recreate the wheel, because in my opinion, if we do recreate the wheel today, in 2 or 3 years, we're going to be back here trying to figure out who we're going to be merging with. And I think Belmont and San Carlos is a stronger entity. You don't have to fix anything. It's there. It's all together. And that's why I went through and on my own time tried to come up with a proposal that would at least be another option for our council to look at. So, Mr. Mayor, I think that's basically what I had to say, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that my fellow colleagues would have tonight.
I will go to Mr. Grocott.
Questions? I don't have any questions.
Comments?
Comments, just the only comment I have is I appreciate the hard work you put into putting this together. I think it's very well studied and written, and I appreciate it very much.
Mr. Royce.
Thank you, Bob, for presenting this. Would like to go through and analyze your financial savings. You're proposing to save about $2 million, or 2.4.
Right.
3 of those items account for $3 million, and they are first the accumulated sick time for Doug Fry, which is almost $400,000.
Correct.
Sick time is an example that we have in this organization, which is fairly abused, because as I've spoke actually at our last meeting, sick time is supposed to be used for sick time. We allow it to accumulate without any cap. And so when people retire, they use it. They could use it for college education. They could use it to buy a cabin at Tahoe. They could actually get more vested in their pension, but it's not utilized. The second point, though, is the most important point, is that with sick leave, all cities, including most cities, I know San Carlos, and I know businesses accrue for sick time. So you pay as you go. And what happens is when the person actually takes the sick time, it's already funded as an accrual, and it doesn't cost you anything. Well, the way we've run our JPA is they talk about it being accrued, but it's not funded. And so the proposal here is saying, well, because we didn't fund it, we owe the chief $400,000. We probably owe battalion chiefs and other employees $1 million, $1.5 million of all this sick leave that is not funded. And so it's basically a little bit of a timing. We owe it to him now. Whether or not we paid for him now or paid from him in 2 years, we owe it, and we should have been paying for it. But to account for savings, there is no savings. We already owe it.
Well, I did.
Let me finish my presentation, please. So to me, there's no savings with that. Second point is concessions with the union. Definitely. We just in the last month got a 10% offer, but there's many unions we're dealing with. Union negotiations will definitely be part of any of these options that we deal with. And your third point that adds up to the $2 million, which is about $1 million, is capital. And you know my feelings on capital. When you have a city, there's infrastructure and capital that we need to invest in, our roads and our sewers. In operations, our general fund we have to manage. And to say that this next year we'll have savings because we'll just skip investing in equipment and repairs and capital is not the way to do business. I use the example, Intel makes $60 billion. They put 20 in R&D, 20 in capital, 20 back to equity and retained earnings. You have to make those investments to operate a city or a business. And I will use the example recently, PG&E. Hey, our experience with PG&E is we have a blast every 50 years. We're spending all this money on testing. Let's forego any capital infrastructure improvements for 2 years. That's not savings. That's being foolish. So when I look at your $2 million of the 2.4, sick time it's not savings. We already owe it. Unions is a wash no matter what we do. Capital, I would not recommend. And one other item is that was not mentioned that I think we all need to look very hard at is overtime. Your report shows for our budget for the JPA of $4.4 million of salaries, we will have spent $1.4 million in overtime. That's 33%. That is no way to run any operation. It's a tremendous premium we pay, and it adds to terrific cost. And going back to opportunity, that's where I would look for savings, because that's real savings. So in summary, I would say, and Bob, you know this, a half a dozen times in the last 2 years, you've changed my way of thinking. You've got great business sense. You're a stable base for making good business decisions for our council. But in this situation, I think we're avoiding the real facts here. I think we need to look at the real savings. Comment in the paper was talked about a long shot. I think this is short-sightedness thinking, because it basically just gets us through a year or two. And I would hope that we could move on to some real options. And my last conclusion are your comments regarding termination costs for the JPA. What two council members on the city of Belmont have spoken about, and I have spoken publicly about, is that we run out of reserves in October of this year. Well, there's also another step that's a lot worse than that. By operating this JPA, which has been, a tremendous service for most of our cities from a level of service, but whoever's got the pencil that's managing the finance, be it management, the chief, and the board, we have examples like this sick leave. We have examples of unfunded side funds for pension cost. We have costs that not only is our equity going to be zero, we and the citizens of San Carlos are going to have to pay to terminate this, because our equity is at the beginning was zero, and we are driving it, and it's getting worse every month. And because of that, those types of accounting standards and philosophies that are used, that equity is negative, and it's getting more negative every time. And I predict, and I agree with Mr. Gaselli, we can't afford to get out of it. Wait a year, it'll be more expensive. And that's my problem with the JPA, is how not they've managed their business, but how they've managed their finance. So with that, I don't know, give it back to the mayor and their other comments. I don't know if we need to reaffirm. A decision is made in our government. Majority voted a year ago to dissolve this JPA. I welcome that you came back, because maybe things have changed. I don't see things have changed. I see they're more confirmed as worse. And again, I would like to move on to real options for our city of San Carlos.
Mr. Mayor, can I respond, or did you want?
Please.
Okay, thank you. I could use part of my 25 or 30 minutes I didn't use. Mr. Royce, I certainly respect your opinion. What I approached this on was a complete cash flow basis. That's all I looked on. Okay. Cash flow completely. Not liabilities, not capital. You and I both know the differences. We're trained to do it. Cash flow. That's all I'm looking at. You talked about a long-term solution. I agree. It's not a long-term solution. 18 to 24 months. I'm using a bridge here. This is actual cash that will not go out. I realize we still owe the chief the money and other people money. I realize there's other outstanding items. I realize we're going to need equipment reserves in the future. I'm bridging. I feel there's an awful lot of things going on in this county, and I believe if we can hold this together, we're going to be in better shape together than we are going to be separately. Because again, as I said, in 2 to 3 years or less, we're going to be right back here going, okay, now we want to try to get together with some other folks. Meanwhile, we've spent X dollars that we can perhaps amortize over longer periods of time. So again, it's all in how you approach it. This is completely cash flow. And you can appreciate why this number comes out that way. So, all right, appreciate your comments.
Totally agree with that.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Klein.
I don't have comments, I just have questions. I didn't know we were going to be commenting tonight.
I didn't know we were going to be commenting either, because I'd love to get up and I get up and comment. It's a wonderful proposal.
I apologize to everyone. I won't be beating anyone up tonight, so it's just going to be questions. First off, in your proposal, the first thing we would do is to rescind the letter of dissolution, correct?
That right. Well, I mean, I didn't put them in order.
Okay, well, that's what I wanted to clear up, because it's number one.
Right.
So you would have us rescind the dissolution. And
I don't think Belmont's going to work with us unless we do that. That's just my assumption. Okay. Again, assumption. I've not talked to
and
you
you're
about.
aware that's the major bargaining chip. Once we get rid of the dissolution letter, they don't have to come to the table, correct?
Understand.
Okay, that's good. I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
I'm leap of faith, as they say.
Yeah,
Mr.
leap
Klein.
of faith. Okay, so on these leaps of faith, so you would require the chief to, because we all know the chief is thinking about it at some point retiring. He goes to Montana a lot, and I'm sure he likes it. So he wouldn't retire, and since you haven't factored it in because it wasn't budgeted, so it would be an extra expense that wasn't in this year's budget, we do have multiple bat chiefs who are looking to retire, and that's about $600,000 worth of sick time payouts.
Right.
We also have a very old fire department. The average age, I believe, is 48, 49. So in these 2 years, we're going to see more retirements, most likely. That's not budgeted in here. So are you saying everyone's going to stay?
What I've looked at was the budget that I received last year.
Yeah.
It showed fiscal year 2011 and fiscal year 2012. Again, a short year, obviously, because in October. I just used those numbers.
Yeah.
I didn't take any assumption because I didn't have the numbers of what the other dollars were.
Exactly, but the way this budget reads, in the next 18 to 24 months, no one will retire.
Let's put it this way. If anybody does retire, hopefully it'll be individuals that will not cost seven, or six-figure numbers. That was my,
Okay.
again, the assumption is implied only because I think that folks that are working now will want to see this to the end of the line, assuming in 18 to 24 months we have a different model.
Okay, and you're aware the majority of the people who will retire are the ones who have accumulated.
I understand that.
Okay, so we're not
Yeah.
going to have 25-year-olds retiring with
Understand.
owing them $1,000.
Sure.
Have you received any support for this from Belmont?
No, I haven't talked to anybody in Belmont
Okay.
about it.
Have
This
you-
is, again, just my
I'm
idea.
just making sure everything's
Right, I'm
clear
just
on
hoping
this.
that they look at this and say, hey, it makes some sense, and maybe they'd work with us.
Okay, and then when your 10% givebacks, that includes management. Management hasn't sent us a letter saying they would offer concessions. Only IAFF 2400
I didn't take
has.
management
So
involved.
management doesn't take a cut at all.
I didn't factor that in here. I just
Okay,
looked
so
at the-
just the firefighters' management
That's
continues
what I
to get
looked at.
paid what they get paid. Okay, that's interesting. And then my last thing is, well, there's two questions, and they kind of go on a school of thought, and I want to see what your feelings. Why is joining Redwood City going against regionalization?
I'm not saying it is. I just think together Belmont San Carlos has a good organization, and I'd be more than willing to take Belmont San Carlos tomorrow and let's get together with Redwood City in a bigger unit. I just
Okay.
think together we're stronger, especially with all the experience we have, as mentioned earlier, and also with the hazmat situation, we just meld right together.
Okay.
And that's why basically, but otherwise I have nothing against that at all.
Okay, and then my final question, and this is, you're saying it's a leap of faith. About 2 years ago, you put together a compromise, which we lovingly call the Grassilli Compromise, and that skewed the funding formula to give us about $100,000 back.
Right.
Your change in the funding formula would cause Belmont to pay a greater share, probably less money, though, because
Yes.
they're saving money.
Yes.
But why do you think they would go for that?
Well, if I'm on that side of the aisle, again, I can't speak for Belmont, I'm just speaking if I'm on that side. If I'm looking to do a standalone, which I went to their meeting about a month and a half ago when they had a standalone discussion, and the numbers they were throwing around were possibly upwards of possibly close to $6.5–7 million. If they can do it for $1.5 million to $2 million less and have the exact same service,
Okay.
I mean, they're just saving it. Why? I mean, I know it's in their budget. I know it's only supposed to be used for fire. They have a dedicated fire protection district. I understand that. But even so, I don't know how I'd sit there and say, gee, well, let's just spend $1.5 million more because we got it. I got to think that they would look at this situation and go, well, gee, that doesn't make completely crazy sense. Let's see what we can do with it.
But you're essentially saying that with this proposal, we should just spend $1 million more because we got it, because the other proposals are all far lower than yours.
No, I don't. I think if you look at the numbers, I'm right in the middle.
And yeah, between the JPA and these proposals, there's no one who's really higher than you.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying, it's $5.5 million at one item. There's costs that are, if we do our standalone, there's a
Well, I'm just
6.1.
pointing out that you have the highest proposal, and so we essentially see you just go
Again,
because we got
I
it.
would not agree necessarily have the highest proposal.
Okay.
But having said that, there is a premium to be paid, and it's like the $750 that we would save is not the $1 million we want to save. We all talked about saving $1 million. And that extra $250 would be a premium that we would be paying for the service that we have and keeping the service we have. I do agree with that.
And my final question, you're the only proposal here that doesn't take into the next year. What happens in 2013?
Again, I'm looking at 18 months.
Yeah, you're looking at
right.
18 months, so what happens in
I'm
2013?
looking at labor having the same situation and not looking for any more costs, and again, trying to figure out some other ideas that we can make sure that our budget doesn't rise very much.
So labor will give back and keep a pay freeze in the following year.
I'm not saying they will, I'm just looking to that because, again, I'm trying to do a bridge here.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to do a bridge. I'm not trying to look at, as said earlier, a long-term thing. Long-term, it doesn't go out that way. You can't. I mean, I'd have to do 10 more pages.
No, and
to figure out.
I definitely respect that honesty, that fact this isn't a long-term
No, no,
solution.
no.
This is
It's a
this
bridge
is a
because
It's a punt.
there's so much going on. This is a churning water, is the way I see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you look at the people in the audience today. Who's here? Every fire. I mean, everybody's here because folks realize this is part of what we're going to be doing, and that's why I say I still say, in my opinion, we're swimming upstream. But again, that's my opinion.
Nope, those are all the questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Klein.
Mr. Grassilli, not too many questions. I will again express my appreciation for your taking the time and putting these things together. In disclosure, I'm meeting on Friday for an all-day mediation. I will keep these points.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
One thing I do in my previous life is code. And among the things that I look at for trying to determine robust code is count the number of if statements you have in it. And there's a lot of ifs.
There's some ifs in here.
There's a lot of ifs, which makes this very difficult code to run. But with that, I have no questions. But in interest that you have taken, again, I do really want to express my appreciation for your taking time to do this, and you didn't get time for questions, so I will give the last word to you, Mr. Griselli.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I think everyone has heard what I had to say this evening. I would hope that when we go into the mediation that some of these points might be brought up, and I realize there's a lot of ifs. There are a lot of things, a lot of moving parts to this. But yet, in all, 5 years ago, we had a lot of moving parts too, and we sat down and we were able to work it out. I'm hoping that we still can sit down as reasonable people, especially, as I said, with the tenor of the times that's coming. So I don't want to beat this to death. There's 3 other proposals that I'm interested in hearing about, the details, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're going to take just a minute or two. I'm going to look at Mr. Mora, and I believe we're going to do the city proposal. And I will go ahead and convey to everybody, we will take a break, a short break after the city proposal is done, and we will have the Redwood City proposal following that. As people are milling about, there is some chocolate here. Yes, I will warn Pat Bell that I bought it, so it's got my cooties on it. I bought the chocolate. It's got my cooties on it, so, but help yourself.
Oh, sorry, Matt, we should pass it down. Save her.
Oh, my God, the horseradish would have, that could have.
I did not see that coming.
I'm good, thanks.
Whole glom on my steak.
Keep them over here for a while.
I'll grab one or two. And actually, so we also have some malted milk ball cookies, so I'll pass them down. Well, no, I mean, Christine wants one. All right, I think we're fortified with sugar, so Mr. Mora, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brian Mora, Assistant City Manager, changing hats now, presenting the standalone City Fire Department proposal. And I just want to take a minute to thank our team in Administrative Services and HR, Finance, the City Manager, our Legal Counsel, and Tridata for their assistance in helping put this together. As Council will recall, during the October 18th study session that we mentioned earlier, the Council specifically expressed interest in having a standalone City Fire Department option. And shortly after the Council expressed that interest, staff began talking about how we could bring that to reality and give you yet another choice for future fire services. The proposal that you see tonight really serves 2 purposes. First of all, it serves as the City of San Carlos standalone fire department, which the Council could adopt if this is the most appealing of the 4 proposals you hear tonight and again on the 25th. But second, it informs the Redwood City hybrid proposal. And the way that works is the positions of fire captain, inspector, paramedic, and firefighter under that scenario would be on the City of San Carlos payroll, and it would have a separate salary and benefit resolution and ultimately a separate MOU, and then would be managed by the City of Redwood City. And when Redwood City gets up, I'll let them go into more detail on how they envision that working. In terms of the organizational chart for the standalone City Fire Department, you would have a dedicated chief. This is a little different than what you have today, where you share a chief with another community. You'd have battalion chiefs, fire captains. We have budgeted if all the positions are firefighter paramedics. Again, that's something that could be discussed right now. That's not the case in the JPA. There's a mixture of firefighters and firefighter paramedics. We would have a dedicated fire inspector, very similar to the current JPA. And we'd add some administrative positions, recognizing that today we do pay Belmont almost $300,000 a year for administration. So we would add the positions of administrative manager, payroll and benefits technician, and a portion of a systems analyst for IT support. Another interesting feature of this proposal and also of the hybrid is that staff believes that it still makes sense in the spirit of what Councilmember Griselli was talking about earlier, that even in a so-called standalone option that we would continue to share some positions. So we would, for example, propose to continue to share the battalion chief fire marshal with Redwood City. We would propose to continue to share the 2 what I call specialty battalion chiefs, the training officer and the EMS quality control officer with both Belmont and Redwood City. That's an existing relationship. We wouldn't see any reason to change that. Also of interest, the City of Redwood City has expressed interest in sharing the emergency preparedness officer position. Council will probably recall that that position is currently shared between the Belmont Police Department, the San Carlos Police Department, and the Fire JPA. In the proposal, Redwood City would like to take the majority of that time and then give us a portion of that time. San Carlos is open to that. And again, as we look at partnering opportunities, we think this is a way to help Redwood City in their emergency preparedness and also to keep some of that resource for San Carlos. So they asked us about that. We think it's a good idea, and we've included it in both the standalone and the hybrid. This is a look at the organizational chart. Again, this is a more visual look at how the city in-house fire department would look like. You notice that the payroll tech and the systems analyst actually would report to the administrative services director. The balance of the position would report to the standalone fire chief, who would in turn report to the city manager, Mr. Malpe. Turning to salary and benefits, and I think this also echoes a point Mr. Griselli made in his proposal. I think it's fair to say that the Griselli proposal, the standalone proposal, and the Redwood City proposal do have some common themes, and one of them is that the way to make them cost competitive with the Wackenhut proposal and also with the city's need to reduce fire costs is to have reductions in salary and pay. However, as this council knows, to date, every city employee has had a 5 to 8% reduction in salary and benefits. It has not yet come to the fire department, only because they are not city employees, they're in a different agency. And so what we've tried to do here is looking at what you've done in the different city bargaining groups and also projecting forward what a new fire department would look at. We're attempting to balance fair pay and compensation with service to the public. And similar to the other groups, we are looking at a 5% reduction in pay vis-a-vis the current JPA. This is a little less than the 10% reduction proposed by Mr. Griselli. Some of the key features that we've done in addition, which also I think help bring down the cost of salary and benefits, we are proposing to set the salaries at the level of a city of San Carlos' size. So we benchmark these salaries to cities like Millbrae and Pacifica, as opposed to today the salaries are compared to places like Mountain View and Palo Alto, which are considerably higher. We have used a work period of 28 days to calculate overtime pay, which results in reduced overtime costs. We're also using the so-called federal FLSA 7K exemption for work periods and sleep exemptions. And what that means is, among other things, that during the firefighters' sleep hours, they will receive pay, but they will not get credit towards overtime. And this also has the effect of significantly reducing overtime, which I think Councilmember Royce talked about in his earlier questions. In the proposed salary and benefit resolution, compensatory time is not allowed in lieu of overtime. And we've also changed the retirement plan, so rather than the 3% at age 55 highest year that you see in the JPA today, we now propose a 2% at age 50 retirement plan with the highest 3 years. And again, there's a significant reduction in cost. In the current fire JPA, the legacy fire employees on the first tier, the cost of CalPERS is 61% of their payroll this year. It will be 66% next year. If you move to this particular tier, the cost of CalPERS will only be 14%. So that's a significant savings. Some of the costs in the standalone model, we separated that out into the so-called ongoing costs and also the first year being some additional costs for equipment and other items. And you see that starting in year 2, the standalone department is roughly $5.3 million in cost. In year 1, it's $6.1 million because there's some initial costs. In terms of the hybrid model, the numbers are $3.9 million ongoing and $4 million in the first year. We also show in this particular model the potential of purchasing a refurbished Quint for $250,000. This is a number we got from both Tri-Data and Wackenhut. And the significance of this is that a Quint is a hybrid vehicle that has both ladder and water on it. And you probably recall in the Tri-Data report, they noted that, for example, in the cities of Woodside and Millbrae, those cities do not have any ladder and never have had. They get their ladder response from mutual aid. However, if San Carlos wished to add ladder service by having something like a Quint, that would be their recommended option. And so we're showing that here as an additional choice. Here is a quick look at the salaries that we would propose in the city fire department. Those are steps 1 through 5. You'll see that in general the salaries are comparable to what you would see in Millbrae and Pacifica. They are roughly 5% below the current level in the JPA. And so, for example, you see salaries ranging from $111,000 to $135,000 for the battalion chief, $89,000 to $109,000 for fire captain, $79,000 to $96,000 for fire inspector, $78,000 to $95,000 for paramedic,
71 to 87 for firefighter, et cetera. And this is a, whoops, looks like somebody missed the scroll there. Anyway, these are the comparable salaries in Belmont, San Carlos, and perhaps the most interesting slide is the third slide that we have, and I'm sure you'll hear about this a little later with Redwood City and Wackenhut. This shows you the starting salaries for these positions for each of the three models, the standalone, the Wackenhut, and the fire JPA. This is a little bit of an apples and orange comparison because, for example, in the JPA, fire chief is only shown at step 5 and the captain is shown at step 3, so we had to mix a little bit. But you can see here that at the starting salary level, the salaries of the standalone are slightly lower than the JPA, but not dramatically so. And in the case of Wackenhut, a number of the salaries are actually higher at Wackenhut than either standalone or in some cases either the standalone and the JPA. So with that, I'll be happy to field any questions the council may have about the standalone option.
Mr. Grisilli, I'll start at that end.
Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Moore, for chairing this, and staff. I know that a lot of time went in on this. You mentioned about work period of 28 days before overtime. What is it now?
I believe it's 24. Let me ask Mr. Montanaro. 24, he says.
24 days. And right now, the firefighters, I believe, have a 56-hour work week?
That's correct, and under the city standalone, it's also 56.
Okay. And again, I don't want to be a dead horse, but again, this doesn't, of course, this proposal doesn't allow for, as none of the proposals do, any extra termination costs that will come in if we break up the joint powers agreement.
That's correct.
Okay. Let's see here. And the difference from the first year to the second year, it goes down about $500,000, I believe, the cost?
Yes, there's some purchase of things like quints and other.
So what you're saying is the equipment, basically the capital outlay is $550 the first year, and we're basically saying zero the second year?
I think in the second year, the capital outlay drops, but then there's a continuing equipment reserve of, I believe it's $150,000 per year, if I recall.
So there's some other items in there that disappear in the second year?
Yes.
We don't I just asked that because I don't think we have that second breakdown all the way through.
Yeah, and actually, if you look in the attachments to the standalone in your council report on pages 2 and 3, you'll see what's called the preliminary budget.
Right, no, I have that, but I don't have it for the second. I'm just trying to identify the items that are disappearing after the first year.
Right, basically equipment purchases.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, really, that's all the questions I had. I might come up with something after someone else brings up, but right now I thank the staff again for preparing this.
Terrific. Mr. Klein.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Mr. Moore, are there many fire departments that do the sleep exemption, either historically or currently?
It is common elsewhere, not so much in the Bay Area. However, my understanding is 2 of the cities in this county are now exploring that as part of their concession bargaining. Okay. So I think we're going to be hearing more about it soon.
Okay. And that's the major effect on overtime, because we continually show these base salaries, but no one actually gets paid the base salary in these departments, because we saw that with our W-2s. They were significantly higher than what the base salary says. But I had a question. Redwood City is going to show us later on that in their management structure, the battalion chiefs don't make overtime. They're treated as management.
Correct.
In this standalone, do the battalion chiefs continue to make overtime?
I would have to check, but I do not believe so.
Okay, so that'll be going more with the Redwood City type model as opposed to the
I believe
Belmont
that's the case, but we'll
okay.
check.
And then I have a couple questions that may be better forwarded to Tridata for them to get back to us. If someone can explain to me the virtue of having firefighters over firefighter paramedics, I would like that explained, because if we have 13 fire calls a year and we have 2,000 calls, the rest are mainly EMS or other type calls, why are we employing people who are just firefighters? Why don't we have everyone firefighter paramedics? And I know there's an answer, and I'm excited for Tridata to bring that forward in a report, because I've heard the answer, but I think it's something that needs to be discussed. And then my last question, and this is a philosophy question, which I think we're going to have to talk about, because in all of these, going in a standalone or joining with Redwood City, we are doing major concessions, minor concessions on salary, but major concessions in benefits.
Correct.
And though no one's really doing that yet, everyone's talking about it, but no one's actually done it yet. So are we worried about creating a second class of firefighters, so we'll essentially become a farm team for the rest of the county?
Yeah, and I think Vice Mayor Klein, that is a potential issue.
I think it's also worth highlighting that in both the standalone option and the hybrid, that a lot of the savings that accrue to the city have to do with those lower salary and benefits. So to the extent that later on those get negotiated away, your savings are going to narrow. So that's an important item to highlight as you're highlighting, and also to track moving forward if those two options are the ones that are of interest to the council.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wasn't so worried about the council holding the line. What I was implying, and the worry maybe Tridata will be able to speak to this in their consultants report next week, is if all the other cities around us don't do reforms, and we're the only one, we are going to become a department that they'll just pick off trained firefighters.
Could be true, although, again, I guess the question also gets down to the philosophy of are the firefighters looking at the salary or benefits or both? Because the salaries are competitive, but you're right, the benefits are a bit more aggressively dialed back than most other cities, absolutely.
Okay, those are all the questions I have.
Great. Mr. Royce?
Yeah, just one, Mr. Moore. That was the new slide I just saw where it talked about the cost of the firefighters and paramedics and so forth, and compared to Wackenhut, who was about 20% more. I'm assuming that includes, the 95, but there at the very bottom, look at firefighter, 95 versus, about 70, 75, maybe 20% more. I'm assuming, the pay and benefits are more comparable. Is it pension that really makes, or what's making the difference of the 95? Because they're contractor, they're getting paid a lot more for other things and not pension, or what's the mix of salary?
Perhaps we could direct that to Wackenhut.
Yeah, you probably want to direct that to Wackenhut, but to give you my quick take on what I think it is, I think you're on the right track, that Wackenhut appears to be offering more of a private sector package of 401k, those sorts of, the sort of pension benefits one would get in the private sector, where obviously in the standalone in Belmont, San Carlos, you'd be looking at CalPERS. I should mention too, by the way, I know that the council's last strategic plan, some of the council members said that in the future, if the city had an opportunity to look at other pension plans and opportunities, you'd like to do that. I would suggest to you that this is such an opportunity. Since you're starting a brand new fire department, I think Mr. Royce used the expression a couple meetings ago, a blank piece of paper, I think you said, we don't necessarily have to have a CalPERS pension. We just assumed at the staff level that's what we would do to try to be comparable. But you could have a 401k, you could have a 401a or something else. And if that's where the council would like to go, perhaps tonight or maybe on the 25th, you should tell us that, and we could be a little more private sector-like in that area. So this is an opportunity, up to you obviously to give us direction on what you'd like to see.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Grocott?
Thank you. I came in today with a number of questions, and I don't see the answers, so I'm going to have to repeat those. Before I do that, though, I was curious about a couple of things. You mentioned about the sleep time, overtime issue, which you had discussed with me today in your office. But a thought came to mind, and I'm just curious how this is handled as a policy. If a call comes in during sleep time, now that firefighter is up and in his turnout gear and on an engine or a truck or whatever, responding to a call, what happens?
The way the sleep exemption works, as I understand it, is the firefighter has to get 5 or more hours of sleep during that evening. If they don't, if they get less, to your question, then the sleep exemption does not apply.
For the whole 8-hour period?
That's my understanding.
That's your understanding?
Yes.
Okay. I guess that would be something that could be negotiated, though, the details of that.
I think it all can be negotiated, and I think, kind of getting back to, I believe, Mr. Klein's point, I think it's probably safe to say that when you have your department and when it gets organized, I'm sure this will be something that you'll be negotiating about.
And that's a good segue to my next question, which is which of these proposals give us that opportunity, the best opportunity to negotiate such things? Because a couple of things I had in my mind as I think it was Mr. Klein when it was Mr. Royce when he was quizzing Mr. Grisilli on some things, was talking about this policy that's been around for a long time on sick time accruing and then guys getting paid out at the end. I mean, that wasn't dreamed up by anybody up here. That goes way back to many years ago. And the same thing with vacation. And it seems to me, for instance, with sick time, you could say, look, if you don't use it, we'll pay it out towards your health benefit as opposed to just paying it out to you will pick up more of your health benefit.
Right.
Using your sick time to do that. Vacation, I think, a policy that says, especially with firefighters, they don't recognize holidays, so, and there's a reason you have vacation for employees. So you want them to take it. So I think having some kind of cap and cash out
Right. Well, and I guess
be effective. So I don't want to get into the detail of those things, but to my question, which of these proposals give us the best opportunity to negotiate those kind of issues?
A couple points. First of all, on sick leave, you're right about doing other things with sick leave. For example, at the city itself, the city has never had cashing out sick leave like the fire JPA. When a employee at the city retires, they get credit towards retirement, but they don't get cash. That's not an option. It is unique to the fire JPA. I think in terms of negotiating, it is different. Obviously, if you pick the standalone or the hybrid, the city of San Carlos will be the employer of the fire captain on down, and you will be negotiating labor contracts. On the other hand, if you were to select Wackenhut, they're the ones that will have the contract with the labor union, and basically, if their costs go up higher than the contract amount, they'll eat the difference.
So 3 of our proposals would allow us to possibly negotiate, would be Grisilli's proposal, if we cared to in the 2-year period.
Correct.
Or 18 months, whatever. The standalone and the hybrid.
That's correct.
Would allow us to do
If you'd
that.
like to negotiate. If you wouldn't like to negotiate.
I love negotiating. It's great. Okay, thank you on those. Now, the questions I came in with today, and I don't see the answers up there, is I had asked if 3 of the positions that seemed comparable to city positions, if the pay scale that we were being shown here was comparable. So the senior management analyst, the payroll and benefits tech, and the admin assistant.
Right, and the payroll and benefits tech and the admin assistant are indeed the same as the city. The so-called administrative manager / analyst is higher. And
Higher than the city?
That's correct. And the rationale is that it is above it's not just an analyst, it's a manager.
Right, right.
Yeah.
The way you explained it to me, it's a little bit in lieu of having a deputy fire chief.
That's exactly right. There was some discussion among the staff about, was it necessary if you had a full-time chief to also have a deputy chief, and we felt the answer was no.
Okay. Can you bring up the overhead that you had of the organizational chart?
Yes.
I just want to make sure I understand this correctly, and that our council understands. Okay, so what I did in the hybrid model, what we're saying is our employees would be those 6 boxes at the bottom with the fire, where it says Fire Station 13 and so forth, and Fire Station 16. Is that correct?
It would be...
the bottom 6 boxes on the left, and then
and the fire marshal.
and then the fire marshal
preparedness,
and the
yeah.
fire inspector.
Right.
Right. Okay, so 7 boxes essentially would be our employees. Everything else would be shared with Redwood City.
Correct.
And Redwood City and Woodside, I guess, in one case.
Yes.
Right? Okay, very good. And then I'd asked this earlier of you on the capital outlay. We had $150,000 on the hybrid and in-house model. I asked you what kind of schedule and what vehicles, and then I also noted that Redwood City is saying we have to keep up with them on equipment replacement. So does this 150,000, if we do the hybrid, this is keeping up with Redwood City's schedule?
According to staff, the the $150,000 a year covers everything but except for the Quint. That would build up enough money in the replacement fund over a 10-year period to replace everything but that.
Everything in a 10-year peried.
Correct, except the Quint.
Do you know what it's been a while, and I don't remember what we were using. I thought we had different, maybe fire board members now know, we were using some different turnover time depending on the vehicle.
Yeah, and I think we would have to get in there and tweak that a bit. I mean, we're inheriting 7 vehicles, we have 3 engines, 4 command vehicles, et cetera. And so our assumption here is that we would initially start with those and begin rolling up the reserve funds, and then over time phase in the replacements. One of the engines is a 2008. It's pretty new, so we're assuming that one's going to be in service for a while, et cetera. So we think that the 150 is reasonable.
Okay. The most important thing is that the 150 would keep us up with Redwood City if we went with that choice. Very good. And then I'm trying to get a bottom line here. We kind of washed over it pretty quickly on, for instance, do comparisons. Mr. Grisilli's model does keep hazmat in there, and as he said, doesn't have legacy costs. So I'm trying to do a bottom line,
Right.
and I have 2 blank spaces on each of these with the hybrid and the standalone. The 2 line items are hazmat and legacy costs. So what do I put in here?
In hazmat, Redwood City has indicated that they are not willing to do hazmat, and in the case of the standalone, the staff believes that the department's small enough that it doesn't make sense to do hazmat.
Okay, but we have to pay for it somehow. We still have to have hazmat service. Where are we
Yeah,
going to
it's
get it? How are
about,
we gonna
if
pay
we
for
were
it?
to be a subscriber versus a provider, the annual cost is roughly $15,000.
15? Annual. Okay, so that's another 15, bottom
Right.
line. And then our legacy cost?
The legacy cost, the last estimate we had from the Belmont Finance Department was something on the order of $500,000 to $1 million a year over 9 years.
Over 9 years. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. 3 quick questions. One, I just want to verify that in Mr. Grisilli's proposal and what the union had come forward with us was a 10% cut. Is that correct?
Correct.
What you were showing here was a 5% reduction in salary.
We're showing a 5% reduction in salary. However, as I think some of the other council questions indicated earlier, I think it was Mr. Klein in particular, we're being more ambitious, let's say, on the overtime and benefits. So I think the union suggestion was 10% in total comp, and I think one could argue, whether our proposal, if you throw in the benefits and the overtime reforms, is at that level or maybe even greater.
Okay. I'll have to go back and take a look at the letter to see if it said salary, but I thought it was salary.
Okay.
I don't recall seeing any benefits.
I read it a little differently, but you could be right.
Could be. Question number 2, we've talked about a refurbished Quint. What does a new Quint cost?
I've heard numbers in the range of $600,000 to $700,000.
Okay.
Mr. Montanaro, is that about right? Yes. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, what we were told by both Tridata and the Wackenhut folks is that there are so-called refurbished Quints available for $250, and that's what we've plugged in that table that you saw of the 21 options at the staff report for all the agencies, again, trying to keep it even.
And just to verify, because people are going to hear that it's a hybrid vehicle, it does not have batteries and...
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So that is a combination engine and truck.
Engine, truck, ladder, yes.
Terrific. The other thing I probably would do is just say that alternative retirement systems are something that is interesting.
Okay.
And that would be, I would be interested in exploring that.
Okay.
Mr. Moore, it seems like we've gone through the questions. I'll give you the final word.
I guess the only comment I would have is, again, staff believes that if the council is interested in the standalone model, it is a viable option, and we think that perhaps one of the more attractive features here compared to some of the others is you do get dedicated battalion chiefs and dedicated fire chief, one of the differentiators, and it also informs the Redwood City hybrid. But again, we think it's an interesting option, and we also would say that starting in year 2, it does get you to your $1 million target as well. So we think it's an interesting choice compared to your current service arrangement.
Perfect. Mr. Klein, just tap me real quick.
Sorry, I totally forgot to ask this question, and no one else did. And I think it's an important question. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most confident, 1 the least confident, how confident is the staff that we can put together a standalone department by October?
I'd say about a 7. We think it can be done, but obviously if the council wants to move ahead with the standalone, or even the hybrid for that matter, we'd encourage you to make that decision on the 25th. I think as you listen to the next 2 proposals, you'll see it seems to be a difference of opinion and timing in terms of how fast you can get to October. But we'd certainly encourage you, if it's one of the 2 city-based options, to decide sooner rather than later, to use a Joe Simonian expression.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Folks, it is 7:45. Let's take approximately, let's assume that we'll come back together with the Redwood City proposal at the top of the hour.
Should I mention it?
Thank you, everybody. We'll continue with the proposal from Redwood City. I see two members of the delegate, several members.
There's three of us.
There's three of you. So I'd like to recognize City Manager Bob Bell, Fire Chief Skinner, and Vice Mayor Alicia Aguirre. Welcome, Vice Mayor. It's a pleasure to have you here. It's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor, and we are delighted to be here tonight to review both of our proposals that we submitted to San Carlos to provide fire services to the community. The focus of our presentation tonight will be on the hybrid model, but we'll also quickly cover the original full proposal that was also submitted back in February. But before we do that, we did want to allow our Vice Mayor to make some opening comments tonight. Our Mayor couldn't be present tonight. It's the end of tax season, and he's a tax accountant, so he is very busy burning the midnight oil. So we're fortunate to have our Vice Mayor, Alicia Aguirre.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Ahmed, Vice Mayor Klein, and council members. Thank you for allowing us to bring our proposal forward to you. Our city and city council is very excited about the opportunity of providing and expanding this shared services model with the city of San Carlos. You know that our cities have had long-standing relationships. We've always worked together. We've done a variety of projects and a variety of community and agency proposals. So this isn't the first time that we're trying or that we have worked together. And last week, our city council from the city of Redwood City demonstrated the support that they have in this partnership by passing a motion last week showing that they support this proposal and the fire sharing collaboration services. As Councilmember Basili said, all of our cities are looking for ways to provide services that are to our communities that are more efficient and cost effective. On behalf of the Mayor of Redwood City and our council colleagues, I would like to let the City of San Carlos know that this is not the only proposal we're looking at. We're looking at many other ways of sharing services and of providing collaborations and really working together. So I'm really excited to have our staff here and our fire chief and our city manager that are now going to bring the presentation forward to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you.
All right, I will go ahead and get us started, and I'm hoping I just click and I'll just do next. Or I'm getting some assistance from maybe your staff?
I think it's the left click.
Okay. Okay, there we go. See, we're already collaborating here. So anyway, I did want to just provide some background and pretty much echo the sentiments of our Vice Mayor as well. First, our Redwood City Fire Department, they've been serving the community and the peninsula for over 150 years. They truly know what it means to serve community and serve the good of the public. We have a long-standing history of partnerships and shared services with San Carlos. Within the fire department, we actually go way back to the 1970s in terms of sharing training resources. And so again, we have that history and that tradition. And with Redwood City, you get a partner that you have a historic good relationship with, both from a political and administrative level, an entity that knows what it means to serve the public and community, and one that wants to expand this shared service models in a variety of areas. And so again, this is really both the continuation of something that already exists and what I would view as the beginning of many opportunities in terms of shared services with our neighbor in the community of San Carlos. The other thing I wanted to touch on is in terms of the presentation tonight, we did get some questions forwarded to us today, and we can cover those at the end. We didn't incorporate those responses into the actual presentation tonight. We just didn't have the time to do that. So I will continue on and talk about the nature of the proposals. We did, as we mentioned, submit a full-service proposal. That was touched on earlier this evening. It covers expansion of Redwood City service area into San Carlos. Under that full-service proposal, Redwood City would hire personnel to provide staffing to San Carlos, and they would essentially fall under the Redwood City MOU that we have with our firefighters and really be Redwood City employees all the way from the chief all the way down the organization. And we would, be providing not only the oversight, but the actual employees to provide the service. And that proposal includes engine and truck company services, fire prevention, investigation, training, and administrative oversight, and it came in at about $5 million. So that was, again, the proposal we submitted earlier. Then we, in working with your staff, your city manager, your assistant city manager, and your acting administrative services director, we've had several meetings over the last 6 to 8 weeks looking at this hybrid model. And under that model, we are, and you've heard about it earlier when your staff presented the standalone option, that there's also the hybrid model where we are providing the management oversight, the administrative support, truck service as an option, training, EMS oversight and training, disaster preparedness, and engine company service. And so we would be providing those services and the management oversight of those services, and San Carlos would be, be hiring their own firefighters, captains, and those other positions you saw, and you would employ them under a new salary and benefit plan and salary and benefit resolution. So we're going to now really get into the detail of that proposal, and we're here to answer questions on both when we conclude our presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our chief, Chief Jim Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. And as we see with the hybrid, this is an extension of the shared services we've had since the 70s, and like Mr. Bell said, we've shared training chiefs in the 70s, and the training chief that is here tonight, Chief Pete O'Brien, did it back in the 70s, and we continue that tradition all the way up till today, and we feel that sharing or partnering with San Carlos is a natural progression of that. We look forward to that. We've had some very good discussions with the city manager and assistant city manager, and we're very encouraged about what we've come up with. So the first part of the hybrid proposal is to provide staffing and administrative and support services. That would be the fire chief, a deputy chief, and we want to note that the deputy chief position is a new position that we both feel is necessary for this collaboration. So we're going to share that 50-50. Administrative assistant, staff we already have, administrative secretary, and a half position administrative assistant to be provided by San Carlos in one capacity or another. And honestly, the capacity and the workload needs to be evaluated. And I'll get into, when we talk about fire prevention, we'll talk about really analyzing what the workload will be and how to handle that. So for the administrative and support functions, what we'll basically do, and there's other functions not mentioned here, but budget administration, records management, incident reporting, quarterly data analysis and activities, personnel administration, cost accounting, and a myriad of other job and functions. So that will cost $420,000 is our estimate. And again, remember that moving forward with this, these are just estimates. Everything needs to be negotiated if we do enter into a contract. So these are starting points to get us moving forward. So fire prevention and investigation, currently we share a fire marshal position, which we're really excited about. We started that collaboration last year. And that's helped both entities because during our fiscal crisis, we've had to eliminate some positions, and one of the positions was a fire marshal position in Redwood City. So for the last 2 years before we provided or started the sharing of the fire marshal position, I've had to do both fire chief and fire marshal duties. Great learning experience. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. But 2 years is enough, and so I'm very excited about sharing that position and getting that capacity back in Redwood City. One full-time fire inspector would be assigned to San Carlos. We think one dedicated inspector would be sufficient, but again, we'll have to look at the workload as we move forward. And we're excited, Redwood City is excited about sharing a disaster preparedness coordinator. And this is a new position, and this is one of the other areas where Redwood City is lacking. So it's an opportunity to help us. So, we look at it as we're not only going to help San Carlos, but San Carlos has the opportunity to help Redwood City also moving forward. So we're really excited about that. And also the fire prevention duties, we'll have access to a secretary that we have to coordinate projects and other activities from our office. So what are they going to do? Fire prevention investigation, services provided, plan checking, construction inspections. This is the big unknown, and this is one of the areas that fluctuates depending upon the economy and what's happening in your city and town. We've seen this go up, we've seen it go down. It's especially now with the fiscal crisis we're in, we can't really predict where this is going to end up, but we'll look at it very closely. And I think there's some ways to deal with the plan check and construction inspections. Some cities have farmed this out to private companies to do that. That's not uncommon on the peninsula. It's done in some other agencies. It depends on what the workload is and if the staff can handle it or not. Permit management, that's done from our office. Code enforcement, consultation with building developers. Public education is something that we feel is very, very important to continue, and I'm sure that San Carlos would want us to continue public education for your community. Fire investigation services, we're mandated to investigate fires, so we'll have to continue that, and right now we have dedicated staff that can do that. Wildland urban interface, inspections and notifications, we have a program at Redwood City, and I believe you do also for San Carlos and Belmont, that will continue with that, and that's very important. CERT coordination, disaster preparedness training, again, that's a new position. We've had to basically put our program on hiatus or slumber mode in Redwood City, unfortunate because we have a lot of dedicated volunteers, and I'm sure you do too. So this would be an opportunity to resurrect that and get some energy behind that, and especially with the event today, this afternoon, we had this earthquake that reminds us that we have to continue with that effort. And the costs that are estimated for that is $258,000. Battalion coverage. The battalion coverage of supervision and scene management provided by Battalion 3, which is out at Station 9, which is in downtown Redwood City. They work 24-hour shifts, 3 platoons. And the on-duty, there's other job functions that the battalion chiefs will be doing, but one of their big jobs is to coordinate daily staffing of all the fire companies, and that would be for San Carlos also. I just want to mention at this point that the battalion chiefs and myself are part of the command staff, and our command staff has over 125 years of experience, and almost all of that experience is in San Mateo County, and especially right here. I mean, our battalions have been responding into San Carlos for the last 20 years on emergencies, if not longer than that. So we have the experience. We know the city of San Carlos. We run a lot of emergencies here, so we want to continue that. And that's $264,000. Training services, we presently share a training chief that's provided by our staff, one of our battalion chiefs, and we want to continue that. I think that that's been a great collaboration over the years, and it's worked well for all entities to get one FTE for the price of 1/3 of a position. And he provides the training that you can see up there, and also provides additional staffing 24/7. The training battalion chief is required to respond to any second alarms right now we share 3 ways, so it's Woodside, Redwood City, Belmont, and San Carlos. And we will continue that, and that's very beneficial and helpful in the case of a large emergency. That's $65,000, but please note that that cost could drop in half if we do continue to share services with Belmont also. Emergency medical or EMS oversight, I just want to mention this. The City of Redwood City Fire Department does not provide this service. Woodside Fire Protection District does, but we have a shared service, and the EMS chief provides oversight to the EMS program day-to-day of the paramedics, EMTs, and this has been very beneficial, again, in that shared service. So the cost for that, what we're presently paying, each jurisdiction is paying $65,000. But again, that needs to be negotiated with Woodside Fire Protection District. Truck operation service, trucks are required, are required in the system that we're in right now to respond to every structure fire, full assignments, hazmat calls, et cetera. And we went back and forth with the city manager and assistant city manager of what was, and this is uncharted territory, how to cost out the services of the truck to our neighbors or anybody who wants that service. So we came up with what we think is a good starting point to discuss how we're going to equitably do this. And so we looked at what the 262,000 and the range to 500,000 equates to is we looked at some analysis, and I think the year that we looked at was the average, or our average last few years was that the truck was required, based on our response plan, about 300 times a year in the city of San Carlos. And so the $262,000 equates to 150 calls for service. We just did a straight mathematical equation of the cost for the four-person truck company divided by the amount of calls that the truck responds to on an annual basis, based on the truck required calls, not any other calls. And between San Carlos and Redwood City, that's about 1,500 calls. So the math for that equated down to $1,544 per call. The $262,000 also includes $30,000 towards replacement cost of the apparatus. And we think that's a fair number to use based on the cost of the apparatus of about $1 million amortized over 10 years. The high estimate is, you have the call, let me back up just a second. The 262 gives you 150 calls a year. Anything over that, then we have to start to talk about invoicing or charging for. And again, this is all up to negotiations. The $500,000 cost is you get the call, you get the truck no matter what. You subscribe to it, you get it for all your calls you need. We don't care about how many calls that might be. So if you decided to go with the Quint, so essentially you would have your own truck available for truck calls. That cost would be zero for that. You would just have to bore that cost yourselves for the price of the apparatus and maintenance of that rig. But again, we'd have to look at how that equitably works out in the long run. But that's an option for you. And I have relayed to the city manager that I believe that if you wanted to get a Quint, even if you went with the hybrid, the refurbished Quint, the apparatus is one piece, but the training of personnel to operate the Quint, because you're not just an engine company that has hose, water, and a tank and a pump. You have the truck company, which is the ladders. So you need to be trained in both of those disciplines. So that could take 6 months to a year to get the personnel trained, because everybody would need to be trained to operate the Quint. Engine company staffing. The engine company services will be provided by San Carlos, which was already discussed earlier with Mr. Moore talked about, and that would include captains, firefighters, firefighter paramedics. If you went with all firefighter paramedics, that's up to you. And this will give the city of San Carlos flexibility of controlling your cost directly to the personnel. So the cost comparisons, cost for full service delivery, our original proposal that we provided in January was $5.9 million, and that was just moving our service area into the city of San Carlos and hiring personnel to do that and working under our MOU, our rules and regs. And let me just mention that even though if we did go with the hybrid, we would still work under one rules and regs. There wouldn't be separate rules and regulations depending upon what city you work in. The MOUs would have to be different, but the rules and regs would be the same. So the cost for the hybrid or the Federation proposal, anywhere between 1.2 to 1.5 million, depending upon, the negotiated cost for the truck service. And so with the figures given to us by San Carlos, so the hybrid cost for San Carlos, 4.9 with no truck service, 5.2 at the low end for truck service, and 5.4 would be the high end. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I will go to my left. Mr. Grocott.
I don't want to go first on questions.
Okay. Mr. Royce.
Sure. It was mentioned earlier, a deputy chief shared. I'm not as familiar with that position, so how would that work? What is their just overall responsibility and would work with the team, both cities?
The deputy chief would be number 2 in charge, would be responsible for oversight to replace a fire chief's position. He needs direct oversight for the personnel in San Carlos, day-to-day operations, personnel issues that might come up. So it would be direct, because we both believe that the workload for all those issues would be too great for just the fire chief and our existing command staff.
And I believe that was 50-50, half?
50-50, yes.
Super. Okay. Next question relates to, we, as we shifted to sheriff, we moved from having our own police force to being a customer. And this is a little different, but it is still a shared service, and we need to be very careful with evaluating how we're doing. And so I'm referring to customer surveys and response and so forth. So currently in your organization, as you're servicing the city of Redwood City, what types of things do you do for customer survey, quality control, just kind of sensing what the public out there is feeling about the quality of fire services?
I'll let the city manager address that, because we do a citywide survey.
And of course, that would be something that we would be interested in, of course.
Absolutely. And just before you answer that question, I just want to mention that with the hybrid, I mean, you could still have the San Carlos Fire Department identity. There's no reason why you wouldn't have San Carlos Fire Department on the rigs. So you could still retain that.
A couple things, and I would first also like to add to the deputy fire chief question too. In looking at joint operation, it does add a lot of complexity to managing the operation. And so, for example, when there's a council meeting, which a lot of yours are programmed the same nights as ours, which is why we couldn't be here last week, it gives us that coverage if we have a deputy chief that can either fill in at the Redwood City while our chief needs to be here, or vice versa, so it helps with that. The other thing it helps too, department head meetings and those sorts of things, and it also helps with succession planning, because though Jim's a great guy and we would really like it if he would stay forever, the likelihood of that happening is minimal at best, so it gives, again, some opportunities for some succession planning there. So I just wanted to add that. In terms of looking at our services, we do a neighborhood survey, which touches on the operations of all of our departments in Redwood City, and a lot of it is focused on public safety. We get very good reviews in that. We had instituted performance measures in the past that we used across the organization. We're going to get back to that to institute those again in our organization and really see how we're performing compared to various benchmarks that we'll use in that process. So those are all things that we kind of have institutionalized in Redwood City. If you had some specific things that you wanted us to address in terms of performance indicators, an evaluation process, or a community survey, by all means, we could take a look at that and see what we can incorporate into the process if we do get the contract.
Yeah, I'd be interested. Okay.
Last question.
Sure. And my last question, and this actually pertains, it's kind of the previous item I brought up with both Wackenhut and Redwood City. We saw some salaries or pay data and so forth. At the end of the day, and I guess this would be for Tri-Data, we don't need to answer it now, the two parts of it, I really want to make sure we understand, that fair wage, benefits, retirement, but those will be, depending on the organization, the proposal, they're going to be different. They may add up to the same, but each piece may be different, or they may be different. And so I would like to understand that more from Tri-Data. And the second piece of that same question is, let's see here, would be where it's going. So your union, I don't know if where negotiations is coming up in 3 months or 3 years. There may be some expectations already with a private contractor. Again, I don't want the answer now. I would like Tri-Data to go through that and know, because a starting point is one place, but for long-term sustainability, even 3 to 5 years, since personnel is a significant part of a service cost, it's very important for me to understand the trend and where it's going. I see a recommendation here of a 5% annual increase. I'd like to get a little meat behind that because I think personnel cost is a big piece of that. So I'd like to understand why 5% and make sure that we concur with that or whatever that number is going to be.
Again, thank you, and we'll get that data. The 5% is a starting point again.
Starting point, that's
So,
fine.
yeah.
Right.
But that's where Tri-Data could really help us in analyzing, again, fair wage and where we're going with personnel costs.
I would like to touch on the 5%, if I may, because we did look at some historic costs in terms of calculating that figure and looked at normal costs of the PERS benefit, not our unfunded liability per se. But there are ways that we could potentially reduce that number and maybe have some reopeners if some unexpected mandated or PERS costs just with the normal benefit come into play that we haven't anticipated. So I did want that out there for the council in their deliberations next
And
week.
we're oversensitive because why we're talking tonight
Right.
is Mr. Moore brought up 6 months ago, in 5 years, our fire costs have grown 30%. That's about 5% per annum, annualized, and our revenues are flat. So 5% doesn't sound much, but that's really the situation we've been in 5 years, and we need to pull a few levers to try to get sustainability within our fire costs. So, thank you.
Mr. Klein?
All right, well, thank you both for coming. Thank you to Vice Mayor Geary for coming. It's great to have you guys proposing again for more shared services. One pretty blunt question. Why are you unwilling to provide hazmat service since you are tied for the first biggest user of it?
Well, because the last fiscal year, we had to make a dramatic cut in our budget, 8%, which equated to one of our engine companies being browned out. And the bottom line is we just don't have the capacity.
Okay. I thought that...
Because if we get a hazmat call and we'll pull services out of the center of Redwood City, and I just can't recommend that.
Okay, well, no, I mean, that's just interesting because we lost an engine company and we kept providing it, so it's good to know what your basis was. In terms of management, I'm noticing your management's actually a little cheaper than ours. Your bat chiefs don't get overtime, do they?
No. They get, if they cover their leave for each other, they get straight time.
Okay. And then one of the things that I brought up was this fear of having the two MOUs. So we're going to have one set of MOUs where the pay is, you're the first or second highest in the county for pay, and we're going to be lower than that, much lower than that. And then our benefits are going to be lower as well. Is this going to be an opportunity for Redwood City to hire trained firefighters off of San Carlos?
It could be. It could be. We'll have to wait and see. Believe me, this is all uncharted territory for me. And all the discussions that we've had over the last couple of months have brought up a whole bunch of different issues. And the reality is we won't know where it'll end up, but we're confident that we could do it. It's going to be a lot of work, but we're confident it could. I don't know if we'll end up hiring San Carlos firefighters or not. We'll have to wait and see.
Okay. Just to clarify something, we have not had that discussion with our council.
Okay.
Either. All right.
All right. Well, you just hired our fire marshal. So I'm just, I'm worried that the pattern might start. And it was a great catch, and we split it 3 ways, and so all that really essentially did was all of our fees went up higher because we split it 3 ways and you guys pay higher. And then my last question is, and I asked this of city staff, so on a 1 to 10, 10 being the most confident, how confident are you that we can put together this organization by October?
Wow. I am a gambling man. But I mean, again, before I give you an answer, if I give you an answer, I'm really reluctant to give an answer. I'm confident that we could, but there's so many things that are out there to give you an accurate number. It's up there, 7 or 8. I mean, I'll give you 7 and up you 1. We can do it. We just need the capacity to get it done, and we got to just work hard and move fast.
So, leading into that, the quicker we make a decision, the better it is for you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Those are all the questions I have.
Mr. Vasili?
My colleagues have asked some of the bigger questions. Excuse me. Pardon me.
Take your time.
I'm ready if you want.
Go ahead, Matt, please. Sorry.
Mr. Gross.
Yeah, okay. Number one, great report. You guys did a super job putting this together, and I wanted to commend you on it. I especially like the way that you weighted some of your figures in the, it wasn't so much in the hybrid model, but course, the hybrid was based on the full service, and the way you weighted those figures in the full service model, I really appreciated. I found it interesting, too, on your overtime calculations and how you go about doing that. I did find a few small errors. I don't know if our staff brought those to your attention, and I'm not going to even bring them up right now other than to mention them, but I don't want to go into them because, as you pointed out, all this has to be negotiated anyway, so we're in the ballpark. The question I had for you is there are two of them that they're operational, really. When you talk to us about the full service model, you talk about administrative oversight and the fact that the chief reports, of course, to the city manager, who reports to your council, and that's how you set policy and do budget and everything else. That piece isn't mentioned again when we look at the hybrid model. And so I'm a little curious if you could give a few comments. I understand that, too, would have to be negotiated, but if you could give us some idea of what direction that might go.
Our desire would be to move it forward into the hybrid, that same model. But keep in mind that I report to Mr. Bell, and Mr. Bell will talk to Mr. Maltby before any issues or any decisions are made that will impact the city of San Carlos. So we're not going to just do something blindly. We'll work closely and have the managers work closely together, and I'm confident they can before we make any drastic changes or moves.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question, you've mentioned a couple of times about a quint. And when I was on the fire board, we'd actually talked to the chief about the possibility of getting a quint, but it didn't get very far down the road. I'm curious how the quint, if we had one, would work into the drop boundary mix, if you could just comment on that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the quint will be either an engine or a truck. And let's say it was at Station 13 on Laurel Street, and there was a fire in that district. Well, the truck would go out. I mean, the quint would go out as an engine. Okay. In a subsequent district, if there was a fire, that quint would go out as a truck, and leave a hole in that district for another engine to be necessary to respond. And that engine would either come from your neighbor to the north or us or somewhere else. So even though the piece of equipment operationally can do both functions, it cannot fulfill the role of both functions at a structure fire. So it's either one or the other.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Good. Better? Excuse me again. My colleagues have asked some of the bigger questions. I just had a couple of smaller ones. You talked about the administrative staff, secretaries, et cetera, et cetera. Is basically the only additional position would be possibly the 50% San Carlos person? You already have the other staff in place?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And relative to, right now we share with Belmont. We do building inspections. We do annual inspections for apartments and things like that. And fee income comes in. The Belmont, when they inspect in Belmont, it goes to Belmont. When inspecting San Carlos, it comes to us. Would you anticipate that would be the same?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we would expand the company inspection program to have the engine company, or if you choose engine companies, to do the inspections, along with the same model that we're using in Redwood City, along with the inspectors doing the inspections.
So basically, like I said, if it's in San Carlos, we'd be getting the income for it.
Correct. Okay. Depending upon what your fee schedule and your ordinance is.
Understand.
You'd have to come up with an ordinance that would allow you to do that.
Sure.
Can I follow up on that really quick?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So the way you would do inspections is you would send out the inspector with an engine company?
No.
Oh, okay. Because you mentioned the two of those.
They're separate. Okay. The inspector would do some inspections, some of the more technical inspections. The engine companies would do some of the less technical inspections.
I don't really have any other question except also, as I'm sure all of us, and I'm sure the mayor is going to say, is we really appreciate that all the heavy lifting that you folks did, and support Alicia of the council, which I think was a unanimous vote to come and do this for us. So really, thank you.
Chief Skinner, City Manager Bell, thank you. My colleagues got all the good questions, so I'm actually going to look obliquely over at Tri-Data and say one of the points that came up in the Tri-Data report was actually about reporting. And so one of the things I would like to see is how does Redwood City do its incident reporting? What sort of database are you maintaining? And what kind of feedback and metrics can we as a council get from that respect? And I'm looking at TriData to say, this is a question I would like to ask for all of the groups, including the standalone option. How would that occur? Again, my colleagues have done all the great questions. So, Chief Skinner, I'll turn to you for the last word.
Well, I think this is a great opportunity, and just as a side note, I've been in the fire service 30 years. I started my career in this building. Right across the hall where the fire department was in 1981, I started my career here as a fire inspector, and it would be an honor to continue that and work with you now and into the future. It's a great opportunity, so thank you.
Chief Skinner, I want to again express our appreciation and thank you for all your service and to your entire department. City Manager Bell, thank you. This is a tremendous report. Vice Mayor Giddy, it's wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much. We're going to move to our final presentation from Wackenhut. It is approximately 20 minutes to the top of the hour. Let's come back at 10 minutes to the hour. Yeah.
The progress of it, right?
We'll start bringing people in.
That one, I'll pass it.
Yeah, you bring it back to us when the lemon bars are gone.
It's on the budget?
Sending you the bill, and then you can vote no on it because it's new spending.
I'll donate my,
Okay.
I'll donate for that one.
Hey, we're cooking.
See, $8 I can handle it.
All right, we'll reconvene. The final presentation this evening is going to be from Wackenhut. Gentlemen, I'll let you introduce yourselves. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. I'm Paul Donahue, the President of WSI. Let me introduce two others and possibly three. Rick Ty, our Vice President of Fire and Emergency Services, prior public fire chief, as well as private fire chief with us as well, and a consultant that we're utilizing, Bill Amador, also a 17 years in the public as a fire chief as well. Before I begin, I want to make a few opening comments, and then I'll hand the presentation details over to both Chiefs Ty and Amador. And I guess we have one other chief, not a fire chief, but a chief financial officer, so nonetheless a Chief Laura Thomas, who's been with us for 15 years. There's approximately 19,300 cities in the United States that are, to some degree or another, going through exactly what the city of San Carlos is doing with budget problems. WSI, and there are many companies like us, we are not the only provider of privatized fire support services. There are several. We're receiving the equivalent of now daily Mayday calls from cities in our backyard, cities from the states of Michigan, not unexpectedly, California, Washington State, New Jersey, asking for proposals, cost considerations, best practices. The town managers, the elected officials, the city council members are looking for some type of tourniquet to stop the bleeding, and not to stop it for a year or two, but to stop it for a longer period of time where costs can be managed, performance can be graded, and a superior product be provided. Let me start by being perfectly clear that the common enemy in the room is not the good men and women that protect the city of San Jose. These good men and women that put the wet stuff on the red stuff, as we call it, are here to do a terrific job, and we support that. It's not the city council, who I applaud for exercising your due diligence as elected fiduciaries of the city. It's not the private companies, the WSIs, the FALCs, the media, the advisory service professionals that support your recommendations, the weather, the stars of the stock market. The one problem in the room, the 800-pound elephant, is debt. This debt is a lagging indicator. The federal government's had it for a number of years. It's, as a matter of fact, how I got into the private sector. My job with the Internal Revenue Service that I was trying to get with the Criminal Investigation Division was eliminated when President Clinton was in office, and I joined this group called Wackenhut 17 years ago, and I understand what everyone in the room is feeling. It's a lagging indicator, but it's an accruing burden. It's an accruing burden on the tax roll reductions that if they were only reductions from the tax revenues would be one thing, but in addition to that, it's a coupling with an increased spending that hasn't changed as the tax roll reductions have changed, that hasn't changed as the environment has changed. This debt, if not addressed, like bad news, doesn't get better with age. It has to be addressed. It has to be addressed now. Any of us behind ever on a credit card or a car payment know what being behind in debt is like. Now add 7 figures or 8 figures or 9, depending on the country. And you can imagine the pressure other council members and governors and the like are going through. WSI just completed our 51st budget. We celebrated last year our 50th anniversary. We have 10,000 employees, which you'll see. Our parent company has been in business for 110 years. We have over 650,000 professional employees around the world. It's the second largest provider behind Walmart in the private sector. Like cities to a state, we have hundreds of sister subsidiary companies under various Wackenhut or, in our parent's name, G4S brands. We have a centralized story that runs through the company, but a decentralized control and execution. Also, like any city or state, we have our share of deserving and undeserving good and bad reports. As I said earlier, I've been with the company now 17 years, and we're doing something in WSI right. When I started in '94, we had 11 contracts, all with the federal government. We'd had some prior city contracts with Hall County and Fire, some prior city contracts with Will Rogers, World Airport, and others. Today we have 247 contracts, which is terrific growth. We've never missed a budget, and we have no sales or public relations department. I welcome at the right time the opportunity to discuss all the good and bad stories that I've heard circulated over the last few weeks. To the extent that I can, I want to assure you that we prosecute our employees no differently than you do if in fact one violates law or company policy. One example, speaking of one of our chiefs, we had over 3,000 firefighters that worked for us while in Iraq for over 6 years. We didn't build these firefighters, we didn't create them, we didn't steal them, we hired them from city, state, federal, and a large population from the volunteer organization, or even the reservist firefighters. They all had to get certificated. Most of them, 3,000 of the 3,002, came home as heroes afterwards. No one in Iraq asked whether the firefighters that were providing life support services, firefighting, EMS support, were private, were they public, were they federal, were they state? No one ever asked. No one ever asked whether they were union or not. All they asked was, are they here for the same mission, and that was to provide U.S. soldiers with the best quality firefighting support that they can. And we think we accomplished that. As a company, in security, in fire, we don't draw lines on any of our professions. As a matter of fact, we recruit. That's how we get Fire Chief Ty, Fire Chief Amador, and about 96% of our population are veteran firemen, veteran police, or veteran past military. There's a few of us sprinkled in as civilians for the business side to keep the mission successful financially. I think you'll quickly find, you've read our proposal, you'll meet some of our team tonight, that we're a nimble team of hurdlers with very few hurdles. As I tell my kids, it's easy to be a bubble popper. It's a lot more satisfying to be a bubble maker. As we walk through our presentation over the next 20 or so minutes, I'm confident that we can perform to your standards and exceed them at far less cost. And we'll demonstrate how with built-in service guarantees. Our blueprint is out on the open. It's not a secret. It's been in place with the federal government and in many local governments since the American Revolution. They realized early that privatization with the right controls is a prudent choice in a free market system. How else would Lockheed Martin build fighter jets? How else would Northrop Grumman build aircraft carriers? Both critical infrastructure, critical materials for the U.S. government. Or how else would WSI have been fortunate enough to win the first critical infrastructure Kennedy Support Services contract in the 60s and then re-win it again in the 90s and have it today? Let me couple these quick facts with just a few more. Today, in a large part due to the men and women that do put the wet stuff on the red stuff, we do have better building materials today. We have different codes. We have better technologies. We have better sensors, better alarm systems, better suppression systems, redundant backups, quality inspection programs, much more training, much more education, and a heightened awareness on safety across the board. These proven integrated systems have changed the complexion of firefighting for the good of all citizens in San Jose and everywhere else, in San Jose and San Carlos and everywhere else. And the contract vehicle delivery mechanism is what I'm here for. The contract vehicle delivery mechanism has to match the new environment in San Carlos, San Jose, and the other cities. It's for these reasons that I look forward to the opportunity to come meet with you and at least spend a few minutes and share why I'm with the company and what solution we offer. With that, I'll jump briefly through a couple of the introductory slides and introduce our chiefs to allow them to get to the meat of your questions. We'll go through a quick company overview, discuss why we're your partner, the strengths, the level of service options, a quick financial review, and some questions. I'll discuss those. Second bullet I'd like to draw your attention to, part of the reason we're less expensive is less bureaucracy. There's a direct line between our fire chief and Rick Ty, and Rick Ty to me, and that's it. A decision that is made in the morning is implemented by the afternoon, whether it's in Iraq, Afghanistan, or San Carlos. There's a government history of relying on government contractors. Eli Whitney, best known for the Cotton Gin, didn't just make uniforms. He made weapons. He made 10,000 muskets for the Treasury Department. He didn't think he could do it. He had a system that was proven. He was able to prove that he could do it. He did it cheaper, faster, and helped in a significant way, much more than just cotton. On the very last bullet, we have a voluntary disclosure mandate that is driven from a top-down process. Our board of directors, when you're across the country and across the world, nothing gives our board more concern than how do you take your lessons learned from failures or close failures, whether they're controllable or not, and pass those through to the worker that's sitting in Taiwan, Laos, or San Carlos. We have an anonymous helpline that allows any employee at any time. All those are recorded. All of them go through my office. I hear each one of them. We have a non-retribution reporting system to ensure that there is no retribution, and we have an award system for monetary support to encourage it. We're the largest prime contractor in the United States, and we do have core competencies in fire and EMS. You'll see a picture of those in a moment. We successfully manage fire departments and contracts this size and larger with similar or greater scope, and on the bottom are just 2 recent awards and selections. Quick snapshot of 12 locations, some of which the first Holston community we've been in since 1984, NASA Kennedy Space Center the last 13 years, and then 10 years before that, the ASF since 1997, Chenault since 1997, Radford since 1994, Lake City since 1982. You get the picture. There's lots of repeat customers. Our average rate once we're in to a contract and performing, our retention ratio is 95%. The 5% is typically on cost. There are several providers. We're not the low-cost provider. I know our proposal looks low cost, but if you were to stay in the privatized market, our proposal would probably be the highest price. From a company overview perspective, we believe we've got the people, the processes, the information, the management systems, the portfolio, and the experience to serve San Carlos. We believe we've got similar projects. Here's a brief example of just some of the numbers associated with fire calls, EMS responses, hazmat, and we can provide as much detail as required on those. From a company financial overview, on our 50-year anniversary, we hit $1 billion. And when I started, we were $139 million in 1994, and we grew essentially 10 times in the last 15 years. We have just under $300 million in borrowing power. We've never missed a payroll in 50 years, and we do payroll each week. And our payroll department is only 4 people. We do it with a terrific system, a terrific set of processes, and a decentralized input system. We've never been terminated for default in our 50-plus years of service, and we have a performance bond that we're willing to put up as well, just for further assurance to show that we're serious. We have a consistent reinvestment program of time and money in the community. By one quick example, in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, we contributed $100,000 a year to build a high school. We did it for 5 years, the length of the first contract. YWSI, leading to the second bullet, we've got 18 unions currently. 18 unions in 45 active locations, 18 different unions. Both of the current operated fire departments in California are both unionized and running fine. We have a mature, streamlined organization, and our motto for the past 50 years is professionalism with integrity. We believe we've got best practices that, to us, are common practices that we'd share with the city of San Carlos and any of the neighboring counties. We've got a proven QA and training program that meet or exceed the federal standards. It's a 3-part program. It's done first at the site level, it's done second from an internal audit program level, and it's done third by a dedicated QA professional that comes out twice a year to make sure that it's meeting or exceeding standards. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Rick Tye.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. We want to talk a little bit about community involvement, and we certainly understand that this part of the strength of any fire department is the integration within the community and the value that one brings to the community. These are just a short list of the programs that we would intend to bring to the community. And you can see CERT training right at the top, and as we saw today, that's a little bit topical with the earthquake that we felt today. Educational programs in public and private schools, and also within the proposal itself are all the training aids that go with these programs. So not just the people out delivering the training, it's the materials that are associated with delivering the training programs also. Senior fall prevention programs and participation at health fairs and community events we think are very, very critical to the community and to link us with that community as the fire provider. CO2 and smoke alarm giveaways to local residents, very, very important program. CPR, first aid training, AED classes are a staple of what we like to do. And other activities that are important to the community, those things that the community think are really important, we want to be part of. The strengths of our proposal, we believe it gives you a dedicated San Carlos Fire Department that participates in all the aid and automatic aid agreements that the council approves on behalf of the fire department. We develop contractual performance metrics and awards fee, and I'll talk a little bit more about the awards fee. We know that there's a lot of questions of private fire departments in communities. So what we are proposing is that, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, is going after accreditation to assure third-party accreditation, so you're actually getting what you're paying for. We have a guaranteed level of service that will be provided to the city, and so once we agree upon those metrics, that's what the awards fee is based upon, and then it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we hit those performance metrics on behalf of the community. We think there's significant cost savings through fixed cost contracting, and assure that Paul will talk about when he concludes. That's a guaranteed price that you get over the period of the contract, and if we've missed the cost, we eat the cost as the contractor. And then you have options for levels of enhancements of the city of San Carlos, and as you go along. So even if you enter into the 10-year concept and you find out that your finances end up going further south than you thought, there's a mechanism for you to come in and renegotiate things within the contract. Or if you want additional services, there's those mechanisms to provide that also. And then advanced professional development for all of our employees. We're very large as an employer to make sure that we put the best program forward that we can, and that's we understand the value of the program is the value of the employees. So we have everything from our own corporate university-style system, if you will, up through courses that are provided online through various institutions that lend to college credits, to bringing in third-party certification programs for fire and emergency service professionals that we have a relationship with Texas A&M University system for that. To ensure that, once again, third-party certification is real important for us. Performance metrics, you saw this in the proposal. There's an awards fee. The awards fee is split equally between the company and the employees. And the awards fee is designed to keep everybody focused on providing that level of service for the community. So if we don't hit the performance metrics, then you don't pay. We lose 6% out of the cost of the contract. We divide that equally with the employees, and then that goes into their 401k accounts. So they get that 50%, and we divide it equally amongst the number of employees that we have to keep everybody focused on the mission. Accreditation. We know that budgets are tight and performance expectations still need to be high for public safety. So we commit to achieving accreditation within the first 3 years of the award. If we don't achieve accreditation in the first 3 years, there'll be a penalty provision written into the contract, and so you would exercise that penalty provision and then obviously negatively award the awards fee or impact the awards fee during that period of time until that was accomplished. as an employer, whenever we take over a contract, we always look to try to inherit as much as the staff as we possibly can. We know that the fire department here has done an excellent job. That's not the contention here. The contention is price. So that would be the first avenue that we would do, is to interview those employees that would be available to us, and then offer those qualified employees positions within the corporation to continue their service here to the city. And once again, we do value that, and we know that they are delivering a great level of service right now. Our screening process includes full background investigations, drug screens to include random drug testing. We have an annual physical abilities test, and then we require annual NFPA compliant medical exams of all of our employees. And then we require an annual live burn training session with all of our employees. The salary range, and we had heard, now the salary ranges we think are very competitive, but you do have to realize that we're talking a 72-hour work shift, a 2-shift 72-hour work shift versus a 3-shift 56. So it's the CAL FIRE schedule is what we're proposing here. And you can see that we offer not only the awards fee for the personnel, but if you look at the battalion chief, the fire marshal, and the fire chief, they're eligible for a management bonus, which is done internally within the corporation, and that's once again based on how successful this program has been to the community. And one of the ways that we'll measure success is working with the city, is that we will develop the online metrics, and so citizens can go online and rate the level of service that they get. Every time that you get a rating, the rating goes to 3 places. It goes directly to wherever the city wants to receive that material. It goes directly to us at our corporate headquarters, and it goes directly to the local fire chief. And we think that's real important. But we think that we've priced it properly to recruit and retain quality people within the community, to make sure that the city is receiving the services that they deserve. Just a quick one on reporting systems, and we're certainly big on reporting systems and the metrics that go along with reporting systems. If we don't have a quality reporting system, how do we know the metrics are being met? How do you know the metrics are being met? So we do use a standardized reporting tool, as well as then customizing that standardized reporting tool. So you get the levels of reports that you want here in the city of San Carlos. It's not just a report that we derive for you. We sit down with you and staff, and you determine the types of reports that you want to see and when you want to see those reports, and then it's incumbent upon us to develop all those reports for you, as well as maintaining control of all the equipment, the facilities, and training, all the inspections that are associated with that. And part of that is, just like Redwood City, we use an engine company-based inspection program, which we think is very, very important. We think it's important that the engine companies get out and they have certified inspectors as firefighters. They get out and they interface with the community. They're also doing fire pre-planning and being inside of those buildings. We think that's very, very important, and it's very cost-effective to do it that way. Now I'd like to bring Chief Amador up.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. WSI has always been a pioneer in providing technology solutions for life safety. And one of the technological advancements that we're proposing for the city of San Carlos is the ultra-high pressure fire suppression system. What ultra-high pressure is, the creation of minuscule water droplets delivered at extremely high velocity. The use of this method to extinguish fire quickly, it separates the fire from the fuel source, and it leaves a thin foam blanket in the wake to prevent the fire from reigniting. The advantages of this technology is increased safety factors and decreased risk. This system allows firefighters to actually apply from the exterior of the structure without having to enter the structure. It minimizes damage from fire and smoke and water, in existing apparatus that are not equipped with ultra-high pressure. As little as 10% of the water goes towards extinguishing the fire itself. The other 90%, unfortunately, often goes to adjoining residents and businesses, causing extensive damage. Ultra-high pressure system uses a third to a tenth of the water with more than 90% effectiveness. Any water that's not applied would obviously convert to steam in the atmosphere and cool the room. One of the potential positive impacts that we see is to your ISO rating, because we're proposing that all first response units have this type of capability, including the light-duty rescue vehicles. WSI has thoroughly analyzed the TriData study, and in particular, the recommendation for the use of the light-duty rescue vehicle and the City of San Carlos' desire for the handle first emergency response. And I could tell you, coming from a fire department in Florida with comparable size and population to the City of San Carlos, I've been using this concept and response model for over 20 years successfully, and it's a proven system. It's currently in use today, not only by fire departments in Florida, but across the nation. So this is not necessarily a new concept. The advantages of a light-duty rescue vehicle is a quicker response. They're specifically designed to respond to EMS incidents effectively and efficiently. Better maneuverability. As we stated earlier, it would have ultra-high pressure capabilities, so it is able to do fire suppression functions and have associated equipment. Decreased liability. Obviously, responding this type of apparatus instead of your larger apparatus is going to decrease liability not only for the company, but for the city itself. You're going to reduce maintenance and out-of-service time, particularly for your larger fire apparatus. Obviously, less wear and tear on the roadways. I heard the infrastructure comment earlier. I know that's important to the city. It's more efficient and environmentally friendly. It's going to use far less fuel than a full-size apparatus. You're going to reduce your footprint. It's going to be less intrusive at the scene of an emergency. And you're obviously able to respond to locations that a normal fire apparatus wouldn't. All options also provide for the utilization of Quints. I know that was discussed this evening, and that is in line with the TriData study and the recommendations. And as it was stated earlier, a Quint is a fire engine with an aerial device. The use of Quints have distinctive advantages. Again, the capabilities of the ultra-high pressure technology. It would eliminate the need for the truck company contract, which we saw from the city of Redwood, so that is a benefit. It greatly improves the level of service currently provided by allowing firefighters, depending on arrival time, assignment, the needs of the fire ground, they're able to work effectively either as an engine company or truck company. It all depends on how they arrive and what the need is. But you'll have the ability to do that, and that would also be beneficial for the automatic aid. So when they call, they can switch whatever function that they need. Could improve your ISO rating for the city, which could ultimately result in cost savings and insurance premiums paid by businesses and residents. These apparatus, along with all apparatus, would be fully compliant with California Highway Patrol, Department of Transportation, any national fire protection criteria and standards. And as it was stated earlier, WSI does recommend as a cost-effective method, the city should consider reconditioned units. Essentially, they're brand new units. They still carry the same warranty. They're refurbished, and they're definitely more cost-effective. All of these apparatus are available in various options, completely customizable to the city's needs, and particularly the level of service that you would like to give. And I'll bring Rick Ty up, and he's going to go through the different options.
Thank you. This is just a quick boiler, so you have that shows the level of options here, and this is just showing you we had to have a platform to work off of. This can be customized any way that the city would like to have this format customized. If you look at the base offer here, the base offer can use either the current engine systems or Quints at both locations or Quints at a single location. The base offer provides you with a dedicated emergency medical services, a fire marshal, which we think is very important, fire prevention services, emergency management, fire suppression, hazardous materials at the operations level. We're certainly willing to discuss if you want to go to the technician specialist level. That's something that has been addressed in the Tridata study, where we do believe it probably resides better somewhere else. If that's the will of the city, we would certainly be willing to take on that responsibility. You get fire education, fire inspection, you get training, you get code enforcement, public relations, special event coordination. And so that's what you get with the base offer, as well as an on-duty battalion chief that is dedicated to watch your operations. Okay, option one starts to introduce the light-duty rescues. The staffing remains the same, 3 people at each of the stations, with a battalion chief, a dedicated fire chief, and a fire marshal, but you start to bring on the light-duty rescues. Option 2 is that you put light-duty rescues at both stations, which is something that we think makes a lot of sense to knock down on the wear and tear on your larger apparatus, especially when you're running the high EMS call volumes that you run here. The staffing for emergency response is provided using the handle first emergency criteria. And then we have an option 2A, I guess you could call it, where you could put 4 people at a station and 3 people at the other station, and so you could have the ability to put 4 people out first on a Quint and 3 people up at the other station. So it can be modified however you believe that the service works best for the city. And then option 3, which we've seen in the paper, sometimes referred to as the deluxe model. Obviously, it's the option that we like the best. It puts 4 people at each of the station, as well as having the dedicated battalion chief, the fire chief, and the fire marshal that also does the city planning. And then at that option, if you put the light duties at each of those locations and the Quints at each of those locations, you get the maximum versatility that you possibly can with the size of the workforce that you have.
Gentlemen, just for planning purposes, the 30 minutes allotted has expired. You can let's let you do
yes, sir.
Summarize.
And last are just the additional services and the financial services that one would see in the proposal.
You've already reviewed all that information. In conclusion, we'd love the opportunity to work with the city of San Carlos. We'd love for you to be a leader in a whole new industry. It's a hard decision. All the proposals today we got to witness, and they all look good. The nice thing is you have a choice. And our goal today was to provide as much information as we can to the council and the members in the room behind me, educate, and maybe even inspire a little bit, if at all possible. If change is what's necessary, the benefit plan structure, as you noticed, is different. The defined benefits historically have been a great tool for retention. In our experience, the defined contribution plans have done an equally effective program. That's been one of the key reasons why the price is less. And the second key reason was the staffing configuration. There's no shortcuts, there's no quality cuts, there's no rounding. It is what it is, and the risk has been shifted financially for 10 years to us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Grisilli?
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, if I could have your indulgence, because this is obviously out of the norm that we have a private company, I would have a few more questions. So I would ask if perhaps I could go over 5 minutes. It may go over 5 minutes. I think perhaps all of us might have that. And as you gentlemen, I'm sure are quite aware, we may not have had questions for folks that are right next door to us because we have a lot more knowledge about it, but we're going to have a lot of questions, at least I am, for you. So I don't think they're hard, but they're out here. I'll just start off. In the financial overview, which was one of the last things that you showed, each year it goes up about 1.2%, 2%. It doesn't go up very much. It's fairly nominal, the cost. I'm just using option 3. I mean, some of the years are 1.2 or 2%. How how does that work relative to, let's say you pay someone $100,000, do they only get a raise of 1%? Or, because most of the costs, I would assume, are labor. Could you explain how that works? Or, I hate to say this, but maybe I'm not trying to get the answer, or do you have enough turnover, and that's why your costs stay the same? Because most of the cost is labor, at least it has been in other offices.
Yes, exactly. And in our multipliers, about 2.5% is what we calculate per year.
Okay. So is that, in other words, but is that relative to because you turn over, and so you don't have to keep giving people more money? Or is it because people are willing to work for 1 or 2% more each year?
Well, obviously, we would have cost controls in place. And that's based on CPI and our projections over a 10-year period of how we adjust our cost internally.
So Joe Smith will start at 100 and be very happy 10 years later to basically make 110.
It wouldn't be 110.
Well, again, I apologize, but most of the costs that we've seen are labor costs. And I would assume most of your costs are labor costs. So I'm confused how it can only go up 1% a year.
Well, it doesn't go up 1% a year.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going nowhere fast on that one because we can do numbers till the cows come home. We have, in this county, we have drop boundaries. Are you experienced in how that works?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you've done that before. It's not a problem?
No, it's not. It would not be a problem. We would honor whatever agreements that the council enters into.
And you don't anticipate that other cities might have problems working with you?
Initially, they may. Initially, they may.
Okay.
We would assume that we're going to inherit a fair amount of the existing workforce. The chief officers that we bring in will be all experienced municipal chief officers.
Okay. Thank you.
If I could add to that.
Sure.
Mutual aid, and in your instance, automatic aid, is on reciprocity. You don't receive mutual aid unless you give it. So the model that you have is excellent. It takes all players to participate.
I know it does. I'm just trying to, but you're different. I hate to keep pointing it out, and it's not the criticism, but you're different.
I understand that. But those agreements are entered between the municipalities.
Right, I understand.
Yeah, we would just
I'm
carry
just
that
asking
on.
if you've had experience working with them, because obviously it's a different model than just working within a city limit.
Yes.
So you have, and you answered the question. Thank you. So you anticipate, again, your labor pool, you would hope that you would get at least some percentage of folks that already are working here.
That would be our preference, yes, sir.
Okay. Drop boundaries. So you indicated that you do have unions in different places. As I'm sure you're well aware, San Mateo County is very union-oriented in almost every facet. So have you worked with fire unions before, or have you worked with perhaps, they're unionized, but throughout maybe different kinds of unions?
Our two California operations are IFF.
So they are fire unions. Okay, thank you. I have one more question, I think, Mr. Mayor. Some of the places that you have worked at that I saw on the map, the 7 or 8 places, it appeared, and again, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure you will, if I am wrong in my assumption, they seem to be more fire suppression than emergency services. And obviously the statistics, we obviously want a fire department, but as I'm sure you're well aware, in the cities now, at least in the peninsula wide, many, 60, 70% of our calls are emergency services. They're not fire services. So it's great to have somebody who knows how to fight a fire. We obviously have to have that, but we need someone who does emergencies. So how would you say you stack up relative, because of the fact that you're dealing with, let's say, NASA or Moffett Field? I don't know how much emergency calls you'd have there versus fire calls. Can you speak to that?
Well, like most locations, we're going to have more EMS calls than we are fire calls,
right,
especially on those facilities. If you take Cape Canaveral or you take Kennedy Space Center, we do ALS and we do ALS transport at both those locations.
But you feel in those places you have more emergency calls than you have fire calls?
Yes, sir, overall.
Okay. There's roughly, like at Kennedy Space Center, there's roughly 1 million visitors a year. All of those visitors are the ones who end up becoming most of the population for the ALS.
So you're basically covering the public as opposed. I was looking at it just with the institution. So, okay. Thank you. I appreciate your comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well within 5 minutes. Mr. Klein.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this proposal. I want to make it clear to everyone, you didn't solicit us. We put out an RFP, and You simply responded to it, so we were the one who started this discussion. So as much as people want to blame you for giving us a proposal, you're doing what we asked. I have a couple questions. So with your call volumes on your other contracts, you Cape Canaveral, all these other places, are you even remotely close to the kind of call volume we get? I'm not saying we get a large amount, but I'm wondering what you get out in your other fire departments. I mean, we're about 2,000 a year. Do you have that kind of that experiencing that kind of call volume?
Yes, at Kennedy, we would be in the 1,500 to 1,700 a year range.
Okay. My second question is to you, Mr. Ty. You're local, aren't you? Or you were local for a
Yes,
while.
sir. At one point, I was local, yes.
And you were a local fire chief, correct?
Yes, sir.
So you feel that this system, I mean, you know San Mateo County Fire then at this point. Do you feel that this system could work in this county?
Yes, I really believe it could work.
Okay. One of the things we've been discussing up here is hazmat. You guys are offering that as an option. How much does that option cost, and what kind of service are you going to provide? Does it mirror the service we have, or do you have a different? A lot of the things you do are talking about doing things slightly a little differently than we do. You say it's more effective, but it is different. What can you give me some kind of background on hazmat?
Well, if you look at a number of our locations, they're fairly hazardous locations. We handle bulk fuels for the space shuttle or for rockets that go out of the Cape. Up to plutonium and other things up at the Hanford facility, and those products associated with that. So we're very well versed in hazardous materials and hazardous materials response. If that's something that, as a city, that you would want us to continue, we would certainly be willing to do that.
Okay.
Could I ask you just a quick question? I apologize. On that note, we provide hazmat for the entire county now, but we're a 40 member fire department, 35 to 40 members. This will be half that size. Do you anticipate you could provide hazmat with that number to the entire county?
Took my follow-up.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, that's exactly what I was going to ask. Is now that we go down to 2 stations and we're no longer in a 4-station system, can you effectively provide that, or is it even something we should even be thinking about providing?
There's a risk associated with the city because you are going to pull assets out of the city. And so if you're going to continue with that, you're going to take a risk every time that those assets move out of the city. So either somebody else has to cover down those stations, or that will create a void.
Okay.
If I could add to that real quick, that's what exists today. With the automatic aid, the city of San Carlos already responds with one of the stations to hazmat, and then it's covered.
2 cities. We have twice as many bodies.
I understand that, but on shift you don't. You still have the same. Well, the 4 members is what's critical for hazmat response. You know, obviously you couldn't do it with 3 because that's a staffing standard that's required in the county. But you know, obviously, if that is an asset that goes out of the city, it would be covered by the automatic aid. So you should still be able to continue to do that.
Okay. I want to talk about accreditation. You were talking about being an accredited agency within 3 years in the national accreditation. We have no accredited agencies in the county. Can you explain to me why you can do it and why we haven't?
Well, why we would do it? Because we think it's important that we always have a third party that is part of the process. That is, it's kind of think of it as the University of Phoenix when they first started out and the accreditation process for online education. We always like a third party to evaluate what we do. We're very comfortable. All of our other contracts have a third party that come in to evaluate the levels of service, and so that's what we would feel more comfortable to ensure you and the citizens here of the level of service we would be providing, and not just us telling you the level of service that we're providing you.
Okay. And you previously had former municipal contracts in Florida, correct?
How many?
No, you previously have done other cities in Florida, correct? Why did you lose those contracts?
In each case is completely different. In one case, in 1997, the project was out for all of 1 year. Operationally, it did fine. The council was unfortunately charged with a Sunshine Act violation. All the council members were removed, and the contract wasn't terminated for default. The contract was terminated for the convenience of the council, of the government. There's been others through the years. Most were priced, though. There's not been one ever in the whole nation for performance. Sometimes price, the most difficult one that we experienced in 97 or 98 was the one I mentioned.
Okay. And then when it comes to this this deluxe model, is the name we've given it, the option 3, you have 4 and 4 in our staffing in each station. Why wouldn't you go to a 5-3 model by having 5 at the station in Laurel and having 2 dedicated to a light rescue? Why would you do 4 and 4?
Well, that's certainly an option that would be open to you. What we've tried to do is balance, so you can move pieces of equipment around a little bit easier. But we certainly do realize that most of your calls come out of one location. So we're trying to do the peak loading on the other station and try to balance the workload a little bit.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you very much. Mr. Royce.
Thank you, gentlemen. First, a comment. Your performance-based metrics and pay is encouraging. That's something that the private sector brings into government that we don't have. And I've been trying for a couple of years to get more performance-based system into our city. So I admire your risk there and actually in looking at that and so forth. So that's very, very favorable. First question is regarding kind of the qualifications and availability of the labor force in the Bay Area. You'd actually talked a little bit about the opportunity to hire existing firefighters, paramedics, and so forth from our current organization. I've also learned actually in talking to people and in your presentation tonight, you're basically hiring people with that experience, prior firefighters from other cities and organizations and so forth. With Iraq, I talked to someone and found out a lot about where your qualified people came. But overall then, can you answer the question, regarding coming into this area, you're new, again, the availability of what I could call, qualified, trained firefighters to do the job here. What experience and what is your expectation?
I'll start and I'll let Rick chime in. In my experience, the lowest, we always try to offer first right of refusal to the existing workforce, regardless. That's a practice we've always used. It's a practice that in the worst cases provided with 50% of the workforce, and in the highest case, Rick's seen it at 95%. So that provides right off the bat with at least half of the risk assessment. When we submitted the proposal to San Jose, just south of you, we ran an ad for a weekend. We got 103 resumes in one weekend. So there is, in our opinion, from the Bay Area, so there is, in our opinion, a significant amount of supply available for what little demand is there. Not all qualified right off the bat, but many did with the proper certifications. So with one ad for one weekend, we felt pretty comfortable that filling 13 posts was going to be doable.
Okay. So maybe as a follow-on with Tri-Data, I would really like to make sure that we understand the qualification of the employee and how it compares to what we're used to make sure there's an apples-to-apples comparison. That there's always a lot of people out there that will slam, well, they don't know how to fight a house fire or whatever. I want to make sure we got available resources and they're qualified, and the certification is another level for the company, which I understand, which is different. And I think my last question, Mr. Griselli kind of asked it. I think it's, I'll take that question a step further. He talked about the dropped boundary. My question was the same as far as what kind of experience do you have working with other city municipalities, other cities? You answered him, so let me ask it a different way. And let's see, should this go to Tri-Data, or maybe you could answer it now? I'd be interested in, there was a comment made, does it always work? I like your answer. You said no. I'd like to understand maybe what 2 or 3 areas where it didn't work, what were the issues, and how you solved those issues. Maybe you can answer a couple examples now where there were major hurdles, and again, working with a partnership, drop boundaries with 2 other cities, you're a different organization. What were a couple of the major issues, and how did you get through those?
I think the critical aspect that we've learned as a corporation is to hire right first. And we certainly understand the apprehension of everybody when you bring something new in, because this is a critical service. It's not only critical for the community, it's critical for those others that you're going to provide in the other community, as well as the firefighters that are going to participate in the entire response. And that's why, as Paul was saying, that we recruit very carefully and make sure that the people that we bring into the system are highly regarded, in this case, municipal firefighters and municipal fire officers. And we fully expect that our workforce will unionize and become a member of probably IAFF. And so those things melt away with familiarity. And so that is the most difficult part, and recruiting and hiring well initially is how we overcome those.
Okay. And one other one?
Could I
One
just
other
follow on?
issue that had come up where you had a rough start?
Hopefully this falls into your description of drop boundaries. Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center, one's an Air Force, one's a NASA, separated by a river. Both abut one another. When the NASA Kennedy Space Center group broke off from the Air Force, there used to be a joined group. We were there to do the separation. So all the firefighters that were on the Air Force side wearing Air Force blue had to compete with the NASA guys. They're two distinct cultures, U.S. Air Force, NASA. There was a huge disagreement up front on everything from staffing to benefits to equipment. We met with the union that's in place there, a firefighter union. It took us about 4 months to work through each issue. Primarily, the NASA side was allowing a defined benefit program for another few years. That's now since been removed in their latest proposal for the first time ever in the history of NASA. And the scheduling program. So we worked first through the defined benefit program side. We were able to prove that the defined contribution plan that we were putting in place in lieu of was not equal to, but was equivalent to. Same with the post-retirement medical benefit plan that NASA had that the U.S. Air Force did not. And the two teams have to work together because they both support each other. So it's our equivalent of a drop boundary. Here at Ames, our fire chief is Steve Kelly, was promoted from Kennedy Space Center to run the Moffett Center, and is the president of the Fire Chiefs Association. His deputy is the vice president of the Fire Chiefs Association. And they also have the training commander, all from Moffett Center. So there's lots of volunteer support just in the local area, and there's been no pushback. They've run the casualty assistance exercises at the airport at San Jose. If you ask our guys, and I would encourage you to even ask NASA as a past performance reference, if they've ever seen an issue with any type of interoperational or community support programs, and there's been none. I go there twice a year. I've never heard of a single issue with any type of mutual aid support. We run into it on the police side, as you can imagine. And we seem to work it out. It takes a little bit of time, and a lot of it's trust and information. And not to extend it too far, we typically, at certain points in anyone's career, we're typically looked at as a competitor. When they get to a point that they retire from that career, we're typically looked at as a resource. So depending on the person that's coming into the company, and depending on who we're looking at that particular time, usually determines the satisfaction of the recruit that we're going to get. It's a common phenomenon that we deal with. Long answer, I'm sorry.
And just when you gentlemen answer, if you could get close to the mic, that would be
This is
great.
all being taped and, whatever.
Okay.
And last question here. You're recently getting the bid for San Jose, the airport, dealing with their city council and so forth. What was probably the most important critical decision factor that council made between you and the second place vendor? Or so their second choice?
Well, it's still in process. We were selected.
Just one, the most important one.
Between us and our competitor, I haven't been debriefed on what we excelled in yet. I have not been debriefed
Okay.
in what we excelled in.
Okay.
We were told overall it was a much stronger proposal, but there was no specific line item that was presented as the one item that was material.
Okay. Great. That's
Excellent. Mr. Grocott.
Thank you, gentlemen.
So my first question is, if we were to go with WSI, we're looking at the chief that we would start out with, right here? Or is it somebody else?
No, it would be somebody else.
Somebody else, okay.
This would be the chief overseeing the chief.
Mr. Donahue, I apologize. You're just going to have to move closer to that microphone. This is being taped, and I can hear you barely. I guarantee the tape, and this is televised for the public. Thank you very much. Please lean over. I know it's awkward.
Will do,
You
sir.
don't have to lean, but we'd like to get it on tape.
Will do, sir.
Thank you.
This is the chief that the local chief would report to.
So we'd have to go through the process of hiring a chief then?
We'd make an offer to the current chief. If the current chief was not willing to accept it, then we'd have to go through a process like we've done several times. We'd look internally, we'd look locally, and work with you for an acceptable alternative.
Okay. Are we the first city to look at hiring WSI for fire and emergency services in California? Not anywhere else, but just and let's even narrow it down even further, Northern California.
I think the answer would be yes today.
We're the first ones to look.
You would be the first today.
In the whole state or just Northern California?
If you were to make a decision, you'd be the first in the whole state.
In the whole state. Okay. All right. If we were to enter into a contract, I understand this is probably a negotiable point, but standing here tonight, your expectations, length of initial contract?
The length of the total contract's 10 years, if that's synonymous for initial.
Excuse me? Repeat that, please.
10-year contract is what we're offering.
10
If 10
initial.
years is too long.
Sorry, if that was in your material and I missed it.
Okay.
I missed it. So it's 10 years, okay. You've mentioned with your map all the different places where you have fire and emergency services that you're providing. Any of those places compare geographically to San Carlos? We've got a lot of different styles of neighborhoods, and we've got White Oaks, which is basically flat, and you get up into the hills and so forth. It's a pretty diverse place.
I mean, my short answer is yes. We've got, in 12 locations across the whole country. If it's in Hanford, there's plateaus as well as mountains. We don't have as many earthquakes, but we do have hurricanes on the East Coast. Demographically, though, I think is as important as geographically.
Mhm.
And demographically, if you're at Caltech, there's thousands of students, professors of all ages on the campus, dorm rooms. It's mountainous, it's flat. A lot of our locations are in some cases, hundreds of acres, thousands of acres. So I think the short answer is yes.
We're 2 by 2, 2 miles, kind of either way, 4 miles square.
Our largest, if you're looking at, say, an urban interface area, our largest is Hanford's, about 520 square miles. And we also run the field mitigation team, so we do the controlled burns and those types at that location.
Very good. This is particular to what I read in your material here. When let's give a for instance. For instance, we have a fire in town, and we have an engine company going out to that fire, and we have currently 3 guys on that engine company. This is, I guess, for any one of you who wants to answer this. From the time that call comes into the station and those guys jump on board their vehicle to when they arrive at the fire, what are they doing? Those 3 guys, what are they doing on that engine?
Same thing they do today. They rapidly put their turnout gear. They put their SCBA on. I'm sure if they have a pre-fire plan of the structure, hopefully the captain is looking at that and getting prepared, best way to approach that structure, any special hazards that need to be considered. If they're first arriving, the priority is going to be life. They'll initiate a search and rescue. If life is not the priority, then they're going to go right into fire attack. But they're going to essentially do the same thing they do today. There's going to be no change there.
Okay. And similar question. A call comes into the station, it's a medical call, 3 guys jump aboard an engine and arrive on scene at a medical call. What do those 3 guys do?
Depending on the option that you select, I mean, obviously with the light duty rescue, it would be different. There wouldn't be 3, there would be 2 responding. One person would be driving, the other person, would be talking on the radio. And
No, I'm not talking about the travel in this instance. I'm talking about they're on scene. They get to the scene and they find someone who's down on the ground, needs medical attention.
They're going to run.
What are these 3 guys doing? Don't narrow it down to 2 or 1. 3. What are those 3 people doing?
The same patient care they do today.
What is that?
Which they're going to, depending on the scene or the type of incident, consider if additional resources are needed, if there's any hazards that need to be identified or response for that. They're going to make contact with the patient. They're going to continue on doing an assessment of the patient, trying to find out what the issue is. If it's life-threatening, obviously they're going to take action immediately to remedy that. The transport unit's going to be responding, so they're going to be following their protocol, which, as we understand, it's a San Mateo County protocol, so they're going to follow it the same way. They're going to render whatever aid's needed and whatever treatment is needed. They're going to perform at the advanced life support level because there will be a paramedic that will be on that unit. And that'll probably be the lead person on that unit that would be calling the shots. And the other 2 would be in support function, helping the paramedic render aid and do whatever is needed to treat the patient, package them appropriately to transport them to the hospital.
Thank you.
Mr. Klein, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, I just missed a question, and I've asked it of everyone else, so I want to be fair. And no one's given me a 10, and I don't know if you guys can either, but on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most confident, how confident that you can put together a fire department by the October deadline? And for you, since you were, as Councilman Grisillia said, it's different, can you give us some backup of the fire departments you put, or how long it actually did take you?
It's a good question. We believe, since we've never missed a transition in 50 years, a 10 is always, I think, overconfident. So I think we're fair in a mid-8. 8.5, I think, is fair. The guy standing behind me was able to stand up 4 stations in 7 days in Iraq. So I think if we can do a similar exercise over 60 days with 2 stations, I think we have the ability to do such. There's still lots of uncontrollables, just like Chief Skinner had mentioned, that are outside of anyone's control that we've got to try to mitigate. We've got plans and prior transition plans in place to mitigate those, but I think 8.5 is a
okay. Thank you.
Great. Gentlemen, thought came to mind just in terms of a disclosure. Can you tell me when you got the Kennedy Space Center contract?
The most recent contract was awarded roughly around either October 97 or October 98.
Were you
still there?
And when did you start?
The initial contract with the Kennedy Space Center was built in the 60s. Wackenhut was awarded the first. I could find out the exact date, somewhere around 65, 66.
No, my question was more just, did you cover the 80s? So just in disclosure that I'll put for the notes, I was working at Shands Hospital between 81 and 87, and we did serve as first response medical for Kennedy Space Center. To my knowledge, I've never come into contact with anybody from Wackenhut, and to some extent this made me aware that you were there at that time.
Let me clarify. We were there it's a 10-year contract. We were there 65, 66 to 75, 76. It was competed on a cost basis like most private bids, and we lost it to a company called Boeing. Boeing Petroleum Services had a business then that beat Wackenhut on price somewhere in the mid-70s, late 70s, and then went bankrupt 3 years later. They bankrupted the division. Johnson Controls went in somewhere in the 80s, and there were 2 or 3 other companies in the 90s, and then we won it back competitively. It goes out for recompete every 10 years. The current contract, the reason why it's 13 years is because 3 years ago, after it was awarded again to WSI, the new administration cut the budget, changed the shuttle plan, so they are in the process of now recompeting. The contracts are all less than half the size, so they're going to small business.
All right, so just to be clear, Wackenhut was not working on Kennedy Space Center?
In the 80s?
In the 80s.
65 to roughly 75.
Perfect, okay, then I don't have to worry about that conflict. My colleagues have asked most of the really good questions. One question I would like to ask, and this kind of goes back to a letter that we got from CAL FIRE. The acting director at the time made a comment that he was reluctant to provide San Carlos with a bid due to, among other things, it was union pressure. You guys are doing a different union, or some union, I don't know what you're going to do, but that was enough to make CAL FIRE fold. How would you intend to address that?
I'll start it, Rick. Our experience, with the exception of one of the locations in Florida where the union was very upset, and the union had a right to be upset, and it had to do with the Sunshine Act violations we discussed earlier in 1997, 1998 timeframe. We've never had a union strife with an existing union, IAFF, SPFPA, and the other 14 or 15 different unions. We've always been able to work things out. There's been threats of strikes, but there have been no strikes. In some cases, because of the critical infrastructure, there's some anti-strike provisions that exist. But in most cases there aren't. In most cases we're able to work it out through negotiation. There's enough. Our feeling is it's not going to be easy. It never is, especially being the first. It wasn't easy on the federal side, and it won't be easy on the state and local side. But we're not overly concerned. We've got a great benefits and compensation program, and for those that refuse to join, then we have other processes to try to backfill. In our experience, a good union relationship is like a good business relationship. A strong union support program will make us more competitive, not less. In the private world, the worst thing that can happen is for a competitor to come in and make prices by cutting your firefighters' prices down, from the chief all the way down through the firefighters. A collective bargaining agreement protects that. A collective bargaining agreement protects the 401k contribution matches by offering mirror benefits. So you end up only losing when there's a union in place on the merits of the proposal. So our feeling is a union relationship is a great relationship as long as it's with the right union and it's a fair deal to be struck.
I've got a question for Tridata. There had been some concerns that were echoed by a previous speaker regarding worries of a private contractor and being in an ambulance. One of the things that I know is that the ambulance service in San Mateo County is private. So one of the things I am curious about is if we could have later on just a brief history of what happened with privatization of ambulance and transport services in San Mateo County. Because at this point, it strikes me, no change in the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department. You dial 911, first responder would be the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department, but at 9 minutes, it is supposed to be an ambulance, and at that point, it is private hands. And I see everybody nodding their head that I have that correct. But I would like some history about how the decision of privatizing ambulance service in San Mateo County occurred. Gentlemen, that concludes my questions. Let me turn it over for you to last word.
In conclusion, just to reiterate my previous closing statement, all four choices are good choices. I think we've won just by helping the council make an informed decision. We think the time is right, not just for San Carlos, not just for San Jose, but with 5 calls a day, we see this as an epidemic. So it's going to start to occur at some point, and I understand the hesitation. I understand the risk associated with the hesitation. I understand the quality of the proposals that you have. It's a tough call. We respect the decision whichever way you make it. Thank you for the time and for the opportunity to come down.
Gentlemen, again, I do want to thank you. This is a very thorough proposal, and it's clear that you took a great deal of time looking at the Tridata report. I appreciate you coming out from Florida and enjoying our little shake, rattle, and roll. And with that, I'll ask if my colleagues have any. Thank you, gentlemen. We've now heard 4 proposals. Are there any follow-up questions at this time you would like to pose to Tridata? Obviously, feel free in the next day or two to keep providing these, but if there's anything that comes to mind, let's go ahead and get a little air on that.
I don't know whether it's Tri-Data or not, but if there's any kind of an estimate, and I know it'd be hard to do, or some, not an estimate because you couldn't have the right number, but a range of termination costs.
Okay.
And I realize because it depends on individuals, who's leaving, who's staying. I understand it's impossible to tie it, but just a range, or you could take there's statistical things where you say, well, we'll take a Monte Carlo, throw at it, and you come up with a number. Just, again, a broad range of what the cost would be. Because I think we all need to know, we all need to know what those numbers are, within a range.
I'm just looking for confirmation from staff if you understood that request.
I did, and we will make sure we have
Okay,
a
thank you.
range provided at the next meeting.
Terrific. Any final requests, Mr. Klein?
Yeah, this is for Tri-Data and our city staff. I'd like to see some discussion in the report about plan checks and fire inspectors. We have different type of models being offered, and I understand now while the economy is down that inspections, we don't have as many as we normally do, but when times get going again and people start building, are we going to need to hire more inspectors? Are we going to have to find a different model in order to not hold up planning department decisions? And then I'd also like to have some sort of discussion in the report about our airport. What service level are we going to be providing? The airport's a very different entity than anything else we have in this city, and we just had a crash last year. So I'd like to see some sort of discussion on what kind of service we're providing them. I understand Redwood City comes out of Redwood Shores for that as well, but just some sort of discussion on that. And that's it.
Mr. Royce? Mr. Grocott?
I would like to see some more critical thinking from Tri-Data on the whole Quint model, because it seems there's, in all these proposals, there's a lot of Quint options. And what I heard tonight when I asked Chief Skinner about this, that if we went with a Quint model, for us it's really just another engine. And then if we're, because of drop boundaries, if we're sending a piece of equipment outside the city, then it's a truck. I get a feeling, my gut feeling is we lose in that situation. I would like some more critical thinking on that issue.
Anything further, Mr. Grocott? Great. I'll turn a question to our attorneys. There was a remark made during the Redwood City proposal about rules and regulations, and one thing I would like to know is, based on these proposals that we're looking at, do we anticipate any changes to our fire codes?
That's a good question, and I'm sitting here getting lots of good advice from left and right.
I'll tell you what, let's have that addressed.
Can I come back to you? with
Happy
that?
to do that, just
Thank you.
throwing it out as a question. Boy, my colleagues really did collect most of this. What I'm also gathering from my colleagues, just to verify, there's, beyond the direction to Tri-Data, there's no additional direction to give to staff at this point. I think there's sort of a unanimous feeling that we do want to see the Tri-Data report and have further deliberations. All right. So that is our order. For the public, for everybody else who has been here, the expectation is we will come back here 1 week from today. Tri-Data will be making a report and dealing with a number of these questions, and we anticipate a good bit of discussion that evening, and depending on that discussion, we may have direction, or there may be additional questions or additional research to be done. But we will meet again here next week and go with that. I'm looking at Mr. Mulpey. Is there anything additional from staff that we should cover tonight?
Nothing this evening.
Great. With that, we are adjourned.
Excuse me, just one procedural question. If we do have additional questions or comments and we want to direct them to Tri-Data, we go through the city manager or directly to Tri-Data?
Mr. Mulpey, what's your preference?
I think it would probably be easier if you work through the staff.
So go through you?
Yeah, through myself or our assistant city manager, Brian Moore.
And with that, I would encourage, if there are additional questions, please, let's get them in. We want to have a very thorough discussion. With that, we're adjourned.